Starting. The Hangout is on air, is live. Yay! Hi, everybody that's there. It is my fault that we are running late. And the reason why it's my fault is my wife at, what time was it, Matt? Like 10:56, calls the studio phone and goes, I've got a flat tire. So those of you that are married with kids and with all the other good stuff understand completely what I'm talking about. You know, life just happens. What is that? Oh, the John Lennon quote, isn't it, Matt? The life happens while you're busy making plans.
Exactly. Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
There you go. You nailed it. And it seems like my internet is running like slower than the slowest thing on National Slow Day. So really, it's been a just one of those things. Matt, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
You're quite inspiring. There's like, for me, it's you and Larry Crane are like my two sort of have been my two mentors the last few years. Before I started to produce like a pro, that was really the two best resources for me with tape and recording hacks, of course. And you could go and I could pick up information in a, how can I put it politely without putting other resources down, in a sort of unbiased, honest, just trying to help people way. So firstly, I must thank you for that, because
you're welcome.
Because that's really was one of the inspirations for me to produce like a pro, was to provide a place where it wasn't about, you know, a forum or anything where everybody was like, no, you're wrong if you don't use the Q97, you know. You understand what I mean. And the other thing I'll say is, like, you know, I'm just going to give you the floor. But why did you start it, for a start, before we get into the mic questions?
Yeah, well, you know, first thing I'll say, though, besides thank you, I appreciate that. It's actually touching to get that feedback. And that's kind of the reason I started the whole thing. But I'll echo what you said about tape op. Total inspiration to me as well. And in fact, when I started recording hacks, and I had giant ideas and nothing to show for it. I had nothing at all. And I got in touch with Larry and John B., who was in Sacramento at the time. And I'm in Sonoma County, which is about an hour and a half or 2 hours from there. I emailed them and I said, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. Can we collaborate? Can I get some of your old mic reviews, which are available at that time only if you had the old hard copies? And they wrote back and said, you know, we get that question every day, but for you, we'll say yes, because we like what you're doing.
Wow.
And to have those guys say that to me, because I was a nobody, total nobody, and they were tape op. I mean, that was the shit. That was the entire universe of how to record, as far as I was concerned. So, yeah, so Larry and John were really inspiring to me and very, very helpful, too, in a very direct way. So my hat goes off to those guys. And yeah. Anyway, so why did I start it? You know, I guess there's a certain kind of personality that likes to have information. And the way my brain works, it needs to have a lot of information in it in a very organized way. And so when I was trying to record drums, because that's my background, I was limited to finding information in the forums, which is a terrible way to find information. And it's just like the example you gave about the QXE 5000. I mean, people have opinions, and a lot of those opinions aren't worth very much. And so what I wanted to do was find out what's available and why are they different. And at the time that I started that, there was this, the business was fundamentally different, and it's really changed to the benefit of everyone. And the way the business used to work, or what used to be more true than it is now, is that a lot of companies would buy microphones in China, and they were all kind of the same microphone. And the primary differences were the shape of the logo badge and the color of paint.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, it's my job, in a sort of very David Horowitz sense, to unmask all of these things and show the world what's hiding beneath. And that's, you know, at the end of the day, that's I felt like, you know, a warrior for truth. But fortunately, the business shifted, because that's not a very fun job, you know, to like expose other people's secrets.
Sure.
But again, the business has changed, and there's a lot less of that sort of model, which is to say the microphones that are being made today are by and large a lot better and a lot different than they used to be. So everybody wins. But anyway, the site started as a vehicle for me to explore this question of how do you build a mic locker, and why is this one different than or better than that one? What makes it good? And as I was learning that myself, I was sort of telling the story in real time. And what was great about it was the Recording X website gave me a vehicle to approach manufacturers and say, I'm trying to tell your story, but I need you to tell it to me first. And so I was tutored by the best names in the business who shared some knowledge with me that I then did my best to communicate to everybody else. So that was awesome. It was huge.
That's wonderful. Without sounding like me too, I mean, ditto. I think everything you're saying there is why we do it. For me, not that it's about me, I'll make it really quick. I just wanted to connect the dots because I felt like there was really good extremes. There's great extremes. There's a place for like, loads of places for like super pro, everybody knows everything to kind of hang out. And then there was a sort of other extreme where there was a lot of beginners being taken care of by home studio guys. But what I found, like, and what I think that you do and Tape-Op does is you connect those two worlds. And that to me is the biggest thing that we can do, is like take away some of the mystery. And for you, it's like, when now with your products, you're taking away a lot of the mystery, because I fire up the Mini K47 and I'm like, close my eyes and I'm like, how much is this again? Really? It's like, and I know that you love hearing that and that's why you did it. But, I think I get $3,000-$4,000 microphones.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be critical of that. And a lot of it's to do with the fact, look, you and I know, we go to a studio and you pull out a U87 from 1974 and it's got dents all over it and it's scratched up, but you plug it in and it sounds pristine. There is a reason why beautifully manufactured German microphones and Austrian are still working to this day, because they were built to the highest tolerances. And so I am not, and I know you aren't as well, I know, and I respect that about you. You're not trying to say, oh, you shouldn't buy expensive stuff. You're just saying you want the quality. I can do it for a fraction of the cost. You want the sound. And I love that about you. So without too much further ado, there's a million questions coming in. And once again, lots of people I've got the live chat up on my cell phone at the same time. Hello to everybody in the Academy. Thank you for joining in. I mean, there's so many people here. Thanks, everybody. Ralph, Chronex, how ironic the internet is your greatest nation on earth. Is crap, go figure. Yes, it is. Max Headroom, anyone? Oh, Max Headroom? I don't know if anybody remembers Max Headroom. You and I would. Good evening, great greens. Hello there in Rotterdam. It is still live. Gayan on now. AJ, hello in Australia. Recording out some Tape-Op have been great. So that's where you tell someone. Yeah, okay. He's pointing out the forum that we're not going to talk about. I don't want to be negative, but we all know the forum where people like to trash each other. And Toby's saying the same thing. I'm not going to point that out. Matt saying, okay. Okay, so Sam I Am says, what do you think of MXLs?
MXLs. So I probably own more MXL microphones than everyone watching this right now.
Oh, wow.
And that is, but let me qualify. So that's the mic that a lot of people start with. And the reason is simple. It's $49, stupid deal of the day, right? If you've got a very limited budget, that's not a bad way to start. The thing that I love about MXL is that it gives you a vehicle for upgrading. Now, this won't apply to everybody. It definitely applied to me. If you're the sort of person who, when you see something, you say, I want to make that better. There's a certain, what you could call like a hot rodder mentality. You take an old car, you take an old microphone, and you say, I can change parts out. And so this is true for me, again, not true for everybody. I ended up starting a business around this. But what I love about MXLs now is that you can change everything. You take out the circuit board, take out the capsule, put in other parts. And then you've got the performance of, the high dollar microphone, except you spent $300 or $400 instead of thousands. So MXL, for the average guy getting started, it's a perfectly fine microphone. I mean, let's face it, if you're starting in your bedroom, you have no acoustic treatment, you've got a $99 USB interface. Do you need to go buy a U87? No. Would it sound better? Yeah. But I mean, you have to start somewhere, right? And it gets you recording, which I think is the most important thing, because if you're not actually recording, but you're just shopping for gear, that's a different thing. So I would say, if that's what your budget allows, you buy it and you get to work and you record and you learn what sounds good and what you don't like. What you'll probably find with a lot of very inexpensive microphones is that the sonic profile is pitched towards the high end. I mean, it tends to be a little exaggerated in the 8 to 12K region. And the first time you put it on your acoustic guitar, you think, wow, that's so detailed and articulate. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, someone take that ice pick out of my ear. Especially if you're stacking up a bunch of tracks and then you have all of those things building up at the same frequency range. You'll find that they don't layer very well. So it's a great place to start. Got to start somewhere. But there's options beyond that you should definitely investigate as your ears mature and your budget matures as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. Chronex, who's a big follower, who's always got great technical stuff, is saying, yes, MXLs are a good base for modding. Eric says, interesting mods for MXLs, so definitely worth checking out. So thanks for, I started after MXL, sorry, the other way around. I started many years before those kind of microphones were available. I mean, the thing with having like a nearly 30-year career is, and starting in England as well, which is quite different. There was definitely the standard of German and Austrian mics, and we had 57s. But as you probably know, in Europe, we are weighted towards buyers. Not many EVs. I think I barely saw an EV until I moved here. And a lot of buyers and a lot of Japanese mics. I mean, Audio Technicas were everywhere in some of the biggest studios. And the reason why I mention that is because somebody else said, what do you think of the AT 2020?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
I own one. I don't use it a lot. It's kind of the same answer. It's a great starter mic. It has some limitations, as you'd expect for $99 or whatever they're getting for it now. That market is one I wouldn't want to compete in. I mean, so here's an amazing thing though, and Warren, you can probably relate to this. When you were coming up, that first generation of made in China microphones were priced at like $600 US.
Oh, wow.
And that was better than multiple thousands that you were going to pay in Germany. But they were quite expensive. And nowadays the prices have gone to the floor, and there's a race to the bottom mentality, because if you can do that mic for $79, you're going to sell a lot more. So, the AT 2020, again, it's a great starter mic. I would strongly encourage everyone to get away from the mentality that I hear all the time in emails of, well, this $99 mic sounds just like a U87 or whatever, because it doesn't. And I think it's a harmful comparison. I mean, if you own it, use it. I also encourage people to compare as much as they can. If you can't get the mics in hand, go to someone who has them and borrow them. If you can buy with a return policy, you can try that. And that was one of the fun things I did on Recording Hacks. We did something called the $200 condenser shootout. And we had 5 or 6 microphones, and we tried them on like 6 different sources, or at least 3 or 4. Voice, drums, guitar, something else. And we've got the sound samples, and online it's hard because you're limited to downloading someone else's audio. You don't know what the room looked like and that sort of thing, but at least it's something. And we tried to have multiple writers put their 2 cents in and say, well, this is what I heard, and your mileage may vary, but at least it's something. It's having some kind of independent voice, I think, gives you a better idea than if you're reading the marketing text, because the marketers are going to tell you that this is the best microphone for every source you've ever used. It's just not true.
Yeah, I try to be positive in everything I do. So for me, if I'm going to review something, I only review things that I think are good. And I know that sort of sucks, but I don't really think my job is to go there and trash talk people. I don't think it helps. So, you know, the mics, I've reviewed your mics and they sound fantastic. I've reviewed Lewitt, which are Chinese, but I like them because they ship them back to Austria and then they put them through tolerances. And I think they reject like a third of them. So they have to certain levels. So,
right.
And I can find that philosophy and I can get behind that quality. But there's a very famous microphone that got pushed really heavily over the last 2 years. And I know we both talking about the same mic when you talk about people going, this sounds just like a U87. Well, I did that comparison and it wasn't even in, not only did it not sound like an U87, it's super hyped on the top end, as you said, but more importantly, it was 5 or 6 dB quieter. And it's just like, and this was a mic that I wanted to like because everybody told me it was fantastic and all the literature said it was fantastic.
Right. So
I think it's difficult. I think you're right. If you can try stuff out, but I think the important thing is, and I know in the back of your mind you understand this, most up and coming people, regardless of age, whether you're 13 or 80, aren't afforded that. They're on their own, maybe living in the middle of nowhere, living in a farming community. So
right.
How are they going to go to Nashville or LA or New York and go to a really nice store and demo 15 different microphones?
Right.
So that's where I respect you and Tapot specifically, because the agenda's a little different. And I'm not trying to come down on other magazines; they have to pay the bills, but I highly recommend Recording Hacks to everyone because these are real tests. And even though you are also a microphone manufacturer, you're also championing other people's microphones. And that, to me, that's what I want. Okay, so NT1 opinion, because that's a good one. NT1 opinion. My opinion of an NT1 is when it came out, it was groundbreaking. And it was one of the first inexpensive mics that sounded pretty good, pretty darn good. Do you think the NT1 still stands up with the amount of competition there is now in that price range, including actually, honestly, your mic as well?
Yeah, you know, I own all 3 generations of the NT1 because I thought that was a really interesting story. The original one was designed by Jim Williams of Audio Upgrades, and he used a version of the Sheps circuit. So Sheps made a pencil mic that's very famous, the CMC5, and that circuit is probably the most copied circuit in history because it's what you're going to find under the hood of 80% of sub $200 microphones.
I did not know that. Thanks for the information.
Yeah, and so it's transformerless. Now transformers are expensive, especially if you make a good one. So I think that's why the lower cost products gravitate towards the circuit, because you can make it with, you know, $3 worth of parts, not including the capsule. But so the original NT1 was a Sheps derivative. They put a large diaphragm capsule on it. It was very bright. In fact, that is one of the early instances of what a lot of people would call the sort of Chinese microphone recipe, which is a transformerless circuit plus a K67 style capsule. The K67's a fantastic capsule if used properly. In my opinion, that mic didn't use it in its best case, and that's why you have that sort of bright top end. The NT1A lowered the noise floor dramatically. They went to a surface mount circuit construction. They went to an IC controlled power supply, which is pretty cool because diodes can make noise. And so they just got rid of the whole thing, which is a pretty nice innovation. And then with the new NT1, the black one that came out in 2013, they added yet more features. And I mean, I have to give props to Rode for continually upgrading the microphone. The new one I mean, the pricing is amazing. It's like $269, and you get the mic, you get a Rycote designed shock mount. So it has I think it's pronounced lyre, those sort of semi-stiff rubber hangers in lieu of an elastic band so they don't resonate. But they also put that on the capsule. So if you take the lid off, take the grill off, I might have pictures of this on the Recording Hack site, but you can see that the capsule has actually got this little Rycote mount on it. And when they sent me one to check out, I hung the older NT1A and the new NT1 side by side. And then I did a very scientifically rigorous test of stomping on the floor. And I recorded that after gain matching, of course. And I forget the number. It was like 6 dB less sensitive. The new mic was 6 dB less sensitive to mechanical noise because of that capsule shock mount, which is pretty phenomenal. Now to the voicing. It's my impression that the NT1 has gotten progressively more neutral over those 3 generations. They went from that K67 capsule to an edge terminated capsule of their own design, and now to the newer version of that. I don't remember what it's called, HF6 or something. I think it sounds better. I think the new one is the best sounding mic of all 3. I think it remains skewed slightly on that brighter voicing, not to a degree that I would call painful. So I think it's a versatile mic. I think it's really usable. I think the pricing is really good. I think what you'd have to do, and this is true of every mic, is try it. And I've gotten emails from people who say it sounds bad on my voice, and I've gotten emails from people who say they love it. So it's one of those things that you'll have to try. It kind of depends on what you want to hear out of the mic.
That's great. I respect your opinion greatly, obviously from your knowledge base, also because you're not pulling punches, but that's pretty cool. And I agree. I like that about all companies that do exactly what you're talking about, which is basically design a product and then continually update it and improve upon it. And I think that sets them apart, and why I think Rode are continue to be part of the conversation, because let's be honest, over the last 2 or 3 years, and I think this is an important thing for people to think about, there's a new product that comes out, microphones, but just in general, a new product in recording, and it comes out and everybody freaks out about it's the new greatest thing, and then a year or two's time, and there's a couple of microphones I can think of in particular, one very famous, is no longer in discussion, but the NT one is still in discussion. So that does give it, that's kudos, as you're saying, to the designers that they are continually upgrading. So it's great to hear that name. I've got a couple of questions here. This is one I want to answer. Somebody said, what about the C1000? I started with the C1000. I think that was my first proper home studio mic, because you could run it off Phantom in like 87 or something. I think I had it. I'm sure it's that old. It was definitely 80s. I don't know, mid-late 80s. And you could run it off a battery if your little 4-track didn't have Phantom. So I think if that microphone to me falls into that discussion, it's like into the discussion of, like, at the time it was groundbreaking, because it was the first affordable, at least for me, the first affordable condenser made by, most importantly, one of the greatest microphone companies in the world. I mean, AKG.
Absolutely, yeah. One
of the truest greats. I mean, wow. And I think it was a very smart thing for them to do, because they made the C1000, and it was like the gateway drug, wasn't it? You got the C1000, and I coveted the 414 because of it. Yeah. I was like, I just want that mic, And then they brought out the C3000, which I honestly think was the worst mic I ever bought. It didn't seem like, to me, I thought it was going to be a because they sold it as like a 414 without everything. I don't know what they did, but when I got to use a 414, I was like, I don't get this. I thought it was going to, you know what I mean? Anyway. Yeah. So, but definitely a C1000, hats off to them. I mean, I'm gonna speak fondly of any company that is making an effort to help support up and coming people, because the more I do this, and then one of the reasons why I do this is because I discover every day people sending me work they've done, and I listen to it, and it's as good as any of the top guys. I'm not saying everybody out there is a genius, but I'm telling you there's a lot of really talented people out there that don't go recognized. So I don't want this sort of, I like to get rid of the us and them mentality of, like, there's all these 5 or 6 producers and mixers that make all the records and everybody else sucks. It's not true. A lot of great talent out there. So when companies like yourself and, guys like AKG, Rode are making products to help people make great music, yes, baby. All right, SM81. I've got 8 people asking me about SM81s here. What do you think of them?
I think Shure is one of my favorite companies. I think
great.
I know a bunch of the guys there, and every one of them is working their asses off to make the best product they can possibly make. And any kind of discussion of marketing or cost or positioning, that's not even a topic. That doesn't even come up. I remember when they were working on, they bought the ribbon line from Bob Crowley and Tripp, and they came out with 2 of those mics, and they spent like a year or 18 months developing a shock mount that used wire rope instead of elastic, and it provides the same level of isolation. And when they say that, you know it's true, because they test everything. They test stuff like you wouldn't believe.
It's great to hear. So, I love hearing that.
Yeah. So I mean, Shure is fighting the good fight, absolutely. And the SM81, I don't have one of those, but I've only ever heard good things about it. And it's widely respected, among other things, for having a really great cardioid pattern, like textbook cardioid. If I'm remembering the literature right, that's one of the ones that it's, when you get off axis, you lose level, but you don't change color. Now that's something that changes with a lower cost mic. When you get off axis, for example, this is something people say about the Octava, the MK012, which is probably going to come up in your questions at some point, because it's a favorite kind of dark horse drum overhead mic. And I love that mic too, but one of the things people say about it critically is that when you get off axis, the frequency response shifts, and that's not something that's true of the SM81. Again, if I'm remembering the profile right. But anyway, I would say if you own them, good for you, and enjoy them. It's a good mic.
That's great to hear. Almost every studio I've ever had has a pair of SM81s. I think because, again, the same reason. It was like the first, they're not cheap, but they're the first affordable pair of microphones that I could ever get a pair of. I've used them on overheads. I've used them on stereo pianos. The question I'm getting here specifically from looks like a girl singer. I'm assuming she's saying, Laura Wallace saying she wants to buy one. She hears it's good, and I agree, on Martin, Banjo, Bouzouki. She said, but would it work on female vocals too? My answer is, and I think you're intimating the same thing, I've never used it as a vocal mic, so I can't speak to that. Do you know anybody that's ever used an 81 for vocals? I don't. And I don't know if it's true of the SM81, but what I've found from some other small diaphragm mics is they tend to be really poppy, really sensitive to plosives. Right.
So I would be cautious of that. And if you're playing with it, you might want to position it up here so that it's out of the sort of blast radius. It's worth trying. I tend not to go small diaphragm on vocals, but. Right.
Yeah, I agree. I agree as well. I tried out the Sawyers, on small diaphragm. I was actually quite surprised. And the reason why I'm surprised is for exactly what you're saying. I'd never used small diaphragm on a vocal in my life. And it was the first time I ever tried it. And I was actually quite surprised. I don't know if I ever use I'm spoiled. I've got a 47. I've got AEAs. I've got RCAs. I've got so many different things I could use, and of course I got Lewitt LCT 940 and everything. So I'm not a good example, but I would say I was surprised with using a small diaphragm. That particular Sawyers is different, but you're right. I would never really think about it. So to answer that, I wonder with Laura. I would say to Laura, do you have an option of a large diaphragm? Because if you're a singer, songwriter, your vocal's going to be your most important thing to record.
Yeah.
So
and the SM81 it would be great on your guitar if you're a guitar player while you're singing to something else.
Yeah. But so it might be worth Laura looking and getting involved in a discussion on large diaphragms in that same price range. Because honestly, I use small diaphragms on acoustics. I'm sure you do as well. But a lot of the time, if I'm recording acoustic between the 12th and 14th fret, I'll put a large diaphragm down on there. So what I'm saying is, even though we're sort of agreeing a small diaphragm might not necessarily be good on a vocal, a large diaphragm is definitely more interchangeable. So maybe Laura, if you want something for vocals, maybe think large diaphragm that you could also use on your acoustic instruments. Cameron's asking, He's talking about the $400 to $700 price range, which is the 4040s, the Warm 87, the Mojave 201 FET. I think he's saying, interesting question, specific about those mics. He's saying, he's asking about those, and then he's saying, well, what about an SM7 over these kind of mid-price large Preamps?
It's, you know, the SM7, actually, I have mine here. I figured it would come up. This is a fantastic mic. This has a usability challenge in that its output is crazy low. It's like 2 millivolts output. And the fix for that is you get a really high gain preamp, or you get a cloud lifter. The cloud lifter is like an inline preamp. They call it a mic activator, but it gives you a bunch of gain. So the SM7 is fantastic. I've heard it on kick. I've heard it on snare. It's an amazing voice and vocal mic. I mean, the common reference is Thriller, right? Michael Jackson vocals on Thriller, SM7. Is it a drop-in replacement for a large diaphragm condenser? No. It's worth owning. It won't get dusty. If you have the room for it, I would say get an SM7, but you'll end up with a large diaphragm condenser or 2 or 3 anyway. So.
Yeah, I wonder, my question, and thanks, those points are fantastic. My question to Cameron would be, Cameron, what genre of music are you doing? And are you the singer? Because if it's just for him as a singer and he's doing rock and he wants slightly aggressive sound, because I have a couple of SM7s, they're great. I actually use one on a hi-hat, strangely enough. Believe it or not, I use on hi-hat because I like my hi-hat mid-rangey. Say again?
Do you plug in your hi-hat mic or just put it there for looks?
Sometimes. Oh, you know the English. I was talking about this morning. When I grew up in, making records in England, we used to do kick, snare, overheads, occasionally tom mics, and never a hi-hat. It wasn't until I moved to America that I started using a hi-hat mic, because we were like, there's snare bleed and there's overheads. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I remember we did some stuff with the Fray at Abbey Road, and the hi-hat mic went out, and the engineer turned to us and said, it's just a hi-hat. Pretty funny. So I would say, Cameron, because a lot of these questions could be answered by, and I know where I'm going here. The question I would have to ask a question for a lot of these people: is it for you as an artist? Because if it's for you as an artist, you can find the mic that works for your voice. When I went to Vintage King and did the mic shootout there, my voice, not that I'm a singer, but my voice sounded good on Wonder's entry-level mic, their $1,500 mic. And yet when I went on to the telephone, it didn't sound very good on my crappy voice. So just because something's $10,000 doesn't mean it's good for me. Totally. However, $10,000 mic was probably good on 99 out of 100 people's voices, where the $1,500 one might be good on half of them. So I think the question would be, is running a commercial studio, or are you just doing demos and recording your own albums? Recording your own albums, buy something not based on price, but based on what it sounds like for you as a singer. And SM7 is definitely a very big favorite for punk rock guys, rock guys, because you can get on them and just scream into them. And there's something about like having a mic that doesn't look so frail. And I know that sounds silly, but psychologically speaking, when I put my $15,000 U47 up there, and the singer asks about it, wow, what's this? And I'm like, oh, it's a 1953 U47. And I'm like, wow, it's really old. How much is it worth? And I'm like, I don't know, between 15 and 20, depending on condition. And then they get up to the mic and they're all like, all timid because they're worried. You know what I'm saying? And then you give them an SM57 and you drop it by mistake and then put it back up on the stand. They come up and they're like, rah! So there's so much involved in and the reason why we have multiple mics is not always only because of the sonics, but like psychological reasons as well. Because Rage Against the Machine very famously, and I'm sorry I'm doing too much talking, Rage Against the Machine very famously used a handheld on the first album. And the reason why they did that is because Zach had never sung into a microphone on a stand with a pair of headphones, and they couldn't get results. And as he gave him a handhold, he started spinning around. They put a PA in the room, and they got amazing vocals. So I think that So, but if it was to say, well, Zach only used an SM57, so why do I need to buy a U47? You go, no, that's not the point. The reason why they used the 57 was not the sonics, but the performance. And at the end of the day, we all know the performance is king.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. We can capture the most beautiful piece of crap in the world beautifully. It's still going to be crap. If it's John Lennon, Working Class Hero, which the acoustic guitar sound changes like 3 times, the vocal kind of half drops out, distorts, whatever. It doesn't matter. Class Hero. Yeah, you get my point. So enough about me. People are asking, somebody's mentioned a couple of times, preamps. People are saying like, you know, if you've got a really good preamp, that will balance out not quite such a good mic. I have an opinion on that. What do you think?
I would disagree with that completely.
Okay, good.
In the same way that your converter can't fix a bad pre and your cable can't fix a bad converter or any of that. I mean, here's my experience of it. The closer you get to the source, the bigger the difference is. And the thing that transduces the sound, which is the microphone, yes, but even if you take it a level, you know, an order of magnitude deeper than that, the capsule, that is what determines your sound. So it's the capsule, and then it's the microphone, and then it's the preamp, and then it's the converter, and then it's the cable, and the chain goes down. Now you can of course talk about the artist and the performance in the room and the instrument. Those are critical too, but in terms of the stuff that's plugged in, the microphone is king, followed by the preamp. And in fact, if you have a really high output microphone, you don't really hear the preamp very much anyway. It has such a small opportunity to impart its color to the signal that it doesn't make that much difference. You know, if your mic has really high output. If it's an SM7, that's not true, but that's my experience.
No, it's great. That's really good. I work on the sort of logic principle. Great artist with a great performance, hopefully a great instrument, great mic, great cable, great preamp. You know, it's like, it's that order. It's right. Like, if you got the great artist with the great performer, even if you capture it on your cell phone, it could still be.
Of course.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, yeah. I know that's.
Your preamp, I mean, your $5,000 pre is not going to make that $50 ribbon mic sound awesome. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. I want to quickly go back. I got to use the Shure, those red ribbon mics when they first came out like 6 years ago after they bought that company.
Yeah.
And on guitars, and they were fantastic.
Yeah,
really good.
That's a fun one.
I was very impressed. Yeah. Okay, there's so many questions here. I'm scouring through to go back through stuff. A lot of people love 414s. There was some of that. People talk, still more stuff about the MXLs and okay, so you're right. So there are a lot of people talking about the Octava MK219s.
Oh, that's the large diaphragm. Yeah, I've got a couple of those as well.
What do you think? How do you feel? I'm assuming you like something about them if you own them.
I do. You know, I got into them because they were seen as a sort of alternative, right? They were Russian and kind of mysterious, and good things were being said about them, and there were some upgrade opportunities, you know, mod opportunities for those as well back in the day. It's an unusual mic, and I don't know that I can speak to what you'd get if you bought one today, because if I'm remembering right, there's the capsule has a resonator on the front of it that amplifies the high end. And if you take that off, you get a very sort of dark, earthy tone, and that's what mine sound like. So I think it's a fun mic. You know, I'm not in a position to say it's better or worse than something. I think it's a nice color choice. It's different. It sounds different. And, you know, for me, that's money. I remember a couple years ago, I got an email from a guy who said, you know, I've got this giant mic locker and I need something to complement that. And I said, okay, what do you have? And he listed 8 microphones that were all basically the same thing, because it was all the same circuit and all the same capsule. A couple different manufacturers, but it was all basically the same sort of made in China recipe. And I thought, well, what you need is contrast. So that's where something like the MK219 comes in. It sounds different than your everyday other microphone that you didn't spend a lot of money on. And again, and this is to Warren's point earlier, it does make a difference if you're asking this question as an engineer versus asking this question as an artist. If you are an engineer, what you want is having microphones that sound different. Because when you put that 219 up on an acoustic guitar and you say, well, that sounds bad for whatever reason, you need something else to put up that sounds different. Because if all your mics sound the same, you're screwed. Okay, so the 219, I think you're going to find it sounds different than a lot of your other stuff. And so that's a good thing to have. Right.
That's wonderful. Sorry, my phone was about to die. I had to go and plug it in. And that's why I'm reading all my stuff from. Yeah, lots of great common sense going on here. I mean, Paul's point here, Paul Lucas, he says dynamic mic will cover up some of the imperfections. Large diaphragm condensers tend to show a lot more detail. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I also find, and this is just me, I think things like SM7s, because they have a similar, and you know best because I don't, a similar characteristic to a 57 with that sort of presence lift in the 3 to 5K area always feels a little bit more pronounced. I also think what I like about SM7s on vocals is they work better when you want to affect them. They seem to overdrive really well. If you want a dirty, gritty vocal tone, I don't use a large diaphragm with that. If I can, I'll put an SM7 up, and if that's what ultimately I'm going for, I'm going to distort the mic. That's another benefit of having a mic like an SM7. Again, though, you know, what we're talking about here is mic locker. I feel like a good discussion for us to have with the up-and-coming people is to maybe like where you start from, because one of the issues with some of the super cheap stuff is that you may never use it again. You may find, yeah, a trashy cheap mic is always going to be good as a mono room mic when you're doing drums, just to get, you know, some.
Right.
But I think and I think this is, a lot of people are aware of this, so they're trying to navigate a minefield of that sort of $300 and less area to make sure that they buy something that they can keep forever. And I really actively encourage that, because we want to build a mic locker. If this becomes your career, or it becomes you're always making your own albums and stuff like that, a sub $300 microphone might be amazing on acoustics. Mm-hmm. It might be, because I have a Gaffel, a 691, you know those mics, horribly painful high end on an acoustic guitar. It's amazing because it already rolls off all the lows and low mids that are ugly in the mix.
Right.
Pull it up on fader, and it sounds like the best acoustic guitar sound I've ever got. And it's really weird. But I wouldn't use it on pretty much anything else. If I put it on a hi-hat, it would be like so brittle that it would take my ears off.
Right.
So therein lies the issue. You get microphones that it's navigating that. I've got the luxury of having 50 microphones, so I can have a 691, which is amazing on acoustic guitars and mandolins and stuff.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't advise anybody buying that as their only microphone.
Right. Yeah, that's a hard thing. So you know, the sub $300 category there's a lot of choices, and it is difficult. I mean, I sympathize if you don't have access to gear, you can't borrow or rent or buy and return, and you basically just have to read some magazine reviews and then pick something, and that's the one you're stuck with. That is a hard thing. I mean, fortunately, you know, the internet, right? You can hear all kinds of sound samples. You can hear shootouts. Look at videos. You can go find testimonials from people. So you just have to do your research and try to hear what they sound like first. It's a very. Go ahead.
I got a trick question for you. This is a trick question.
All right.
Because now you get a $300 microphone, and you have not tried to sell it. But my trick question is, and you might not want to answer this, but who in your mind, because I think this will help people and will also endear them to you, who in your mind makes the microphone that you're competing against? That, do you know what I mean? So like, you don't have to trash anything, but you can be like, my microphone at $300, its competitors are, you know what I mean? So it gives people an idea, because I think if we could bring it down to like 3 or 4 microphones that you feel are in your competing with you, even if they're $100 more or whatever. I think it would really help people, and we can also focus on them ongoing, because this is such a big question. I get asked so much about this price range, because I think I read something about beginners the other day that their whole recording setup is less than $500 for most people.
Right.
So they will probably be on headphones or hi-fi speakers, but probably headphones. That whatever computer they own, it's not including the computer. The DAW, which is either free or super cheap, and an interface is maybe $300. So we're now down to like $200 or $300 for a microphone.
Yeah.
So my trick question, sorry to ask it.
No, it's all good. You know, because I don't live in a vacuum. So my company is Roswell Pro Audio. We make a microphone that streets for $299. It's right in that price point.
Yep.
Do we compete with everything else under that price point? You know, my sales director says no, because it's different and it ought to cost $499.
Oh, I agree.
He put it on his piano, jaw drop. I've had that experience a couple of times, and I love hearing that. I mean, we made this as inexpensively as we could to get the sound without compromising the sound that we wanted to get. There are some economies of scale there. When we first introduced it, it didn't come with a shock mount, and it came in a cardboard box.
Yeah.
And now it comes with a shock mount, and actually at the moment you can't even buy one because it's sold out everywhere because the popularity has been snowballing. And so when we re-release it in a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, I hope, it'll have a shock mount that's really, really nice, and it'll come with a flight case too. So right as the popularity grows and we're able to make larger quantities, we're able to institute some pricing advantages that we give to you, because we keep adding stuff to the mic without changing the price. So everybody wins. Anyway, the key thing you said, Warren, that I think is critical is people want to buy something that they're going to use forever.
Exactly.
Because if you're going to spend $300, I mean, yeah, you can spend $5,000 on a mic, but that doesn't mean that your $300 mic has to be a throwaway. Okay, so that's exactly the kind of thing that we're trying to build, is something that you will use forever. And I think we've landed in a good place with it. Now you can go to Guitar Center, Musician's Friend, whatever, and you can type in condenser mics under $300, and you'll see 20 or 30 entries. Shure has something, Audio-Technica has something, Sterling Audio, which is the house brand of Guitar Center, has something. The Rode NT1 is in there. So there's a bunch of choices. What you're going to find, in my opinion, is that many of them tend to be voiced with that sort of brighter top couple of octaves. And that's a direct result of the way that they're built. The Mini K47 is the Roswell mic that's in that price category, and it doesn't sound like that because we don't use the capsule that gives you that sound. And that is the fundamental distinction between our mic and the rest. And it's not something you're going to find in any of those other mics, because no one else has the capsule that we make for this microphone. So I actually have one of these here because I think we said we're going to give one of these away.
We are going to give one of these away.
So this is the world's first view of the new and improved Roswell Mini K47. So this is the new shock mount. We developed this for our Delphos microphone. It's a screw-on shock mount. It doesn't have that crazy long elastic cord. If you've ever tried to restring one of those microphones, it's like a tennis racket. I mean, that comes apart. Just buy a new one.
I've got one in there that's taped up on a Neumann. It's all like taped up, and I keep. We didn't order the new shock mount, and every time I film, I'm looking at it going, and people are like, "Really?" I'm just another regular human being like everybody else. I've got to upholster my SSL here. It's been ripped for like 5 years, and Rob Schnaff like leaves a comment every other day like, up to your console. You know, it's like
right.
You know,
you're like a regular human being with.
I'm a regular human being, exactly, with gear. All of us tape things up, and so I hear you with the shock mount. That is a huge deal. If something is durable and lasts, then God bless you.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's this nice shock mount with these short elastic cords, rubber cords. They don't resonate, and they're easy to replace. If one snaps, we give you some replacements. The mic screws in, which is just a more secure mounting. There's no risk of it, like of that spring clip loosening up and the mic dropping to the floor. So anyway, really nice shock mount. We've got a powder coat finish on it. The earlier generations had paint, so this is powder coat, so you can scratch on it and it doesn't show. We've upgraded the circuit, done some tricks to the voltage. We've upgraded to polypropylene capacitors, signal capacitors, so that's really awesome. So better mic, same price. You know, will you use it forever? I certainly hope so. You know, we've definitely sold a bunch of these into studios. This is not something where, you know, yeah, the home studio guy buys it, but you'd never actually see one in a recording studio. That's not true of this mic. We've sold a bunch into professional studios, and they love it on, you know, piano, guitar, vocals. You know, we get emails. This is my go-to mic on insert source here, and I hear that about mandolin, dobro, vocals, acoustic guitar, drum overheads. So it's pretty versatile. Now, will it work for you? I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah.
But it depends on what you want to hear. There is no perfect mic. You know, I get that question too. What's the perfect mic for whatever? I'm like, there isn't. You know, it depends on you. It depends on your voice, your ears, your room. It depends on the production. I mean, you want to use that super bright Gefell mic on acoustic guitar today, but what about tomorrow? It's a different guitar. It's a different song. Yeah. Maybe that's not the sound. Maybe it's a solo guitar thing, and you can't have that rolled off low end, right? So there's a lot of factors there. But anyway, we're actively working to answer that question. What's a mic that I can afford that I won't throw away in 2 years? I hope this is it. That's what we're trying.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. Well, I appreciate all that response. I mean, and you know, look, I have a huge amount of respect for what you do, because you've come from this place. You've come from this place of total honesty, of just like helping people, and the fact that you've been supportive of every mic that we brought up and found the good is really. There's a big discussion going on about analog versus digital in our feed. I'm not going to get into it. I worked in both and love both. And some people are saying you can use an SM57 on anything. Yeah, I agree. You can.
Can I back up?
Please. Analog
versus digital.
Oh, you're gonna take that. You're gonna take that one.
No, I'm gonna throw chum in the waters. We did a thing, because I you know, Recording Hacks, we've had that question before too. And Adam Kagan is a producer in LA. You might know him actually.
Sure.
Adam has a robot piano, right? A MIDI grand, an acoustic grand piano with MIDI. Here's the hard thing about like digital versus tape shootouts, or any kind of shootout. If you have to do the performance twice, then you're not going to hear the difference between this mic and that mic, or this media and that media, because the performance differences are like a 10x factor as compared to the sonic nuances of tape versus digital, or this mic versus that. So what he did is he did a MIDI piano that was an actual performance. I think it was a Latin piece. And he used, therefore, the exact same microphone in exactly the same position. He just performed it twice. Same signal chain, except one went to tape, one went to Pro Tools digital. And then we have the sound samples up so you can listen. And the war that's happening in your chat room is happening in the comment section as well, because people have very closely held opinions about which is better. As I recall, Adam's point was, I like tape for some things. When I want to overload the tape and get those favorable sonic artifacts that you get from overdriving tape, for example, drums, certain kinds of vocals. Other times, yeah, other times digital is superior. So anyway, you know, those people who want to experience the question and don't have access to the instrument, the room, and the tools to do that, Recording Hacks has this thing, and you could check it out and listen for yourself. Love it.
Yep, and A80 sitting in the corner. My experience. What is up with my computer? It's opening something up. Are you still there?
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
I can. My computer's having a fit.
Is it your internet? Your Wi-Fi, I mean?
I don't know what's going on. iTunes is launching itself. Very interesting. Anyway, I have made records on both, and I actually had a really good experience, because when I did that Aerosmith record, it was 9 months of my life. So for 9 months, I was working on tape and then I ended up using digital. So I was kind of like moving in this world. So I got to do direct shootouts. The differences are vast when you take into account something you touched upon. See, here's my opinion and why I love the scientific approach to a point. The reason why I don't actually agree with the science, and this is where people are going to hate me and disagree, is that as a musician and a performer, I respond to what I hear. So if you give me a mic that's dark, bright, middly, whatever, I perform differently. Mm-hmm. If it's super, super bright, and I might play softer. If it's the other way around, I might dig in and be more aggressive. So I have because I use these speakers, for instance, totally change the subject. I'll get back on the mics in a second, but just as a point of reference, I use these tone tubby speakers. And the reason why I use them is that I found out about them a couple of years ago at a trade show, because they're made of hemp and they're a little bit darker. Mm-hmm. So I went online and I saw this thing with an SM57 and a DI'd guitar playing through an amp, and it was the same signal chain every single time. It was doing exactly what you described. And of course, it came up to the Celestion. The classic sound of a Celestion sounded amazing, exactly what we want, like a 25, vintage 25 or 30 or whatever it was. And then it went to the tone tubby, and it sounded darker, and everybody was like, oh, I don't like the tone tubby, it sounds darker. It's like, and I was like, excellent, that's what I want. So now I have a tone tubby on my Marshall, and I have a 78 JMP, I have a Plexi, it's one of my favorite amps. And it went from being an amp that I occasionally used because it was so bright and aggressive, mm-hmm. to an amp that I use on everything that I record now, because it makes the amp more versatile for me. It gets rid of that high end that I used to have to EQ out, which is great for heavy rock. Don't get me wrong. When I'm doing heavy rock, I'll put it for a Celestion and go choo-choo-choo-choo-choo. But suddenly I've got a more versatile amp. My point is like, you know what I'm saying. And when I play through it, I perform differently. So I've done these shootouts with microphones, and people say to me, well, it's not science, you know, and even when I use two, like the capsules aren't touching and the phase relationship. Exactly. And I'm like, and they say all these things, and I actually agree. In pure scientific terms, I think that they are 100% right. However, that isn't how music is made. Music is made by performers, right. And they put a pair of headphones on, or they sit between these speakers, and the sound coming out and their relationship and their interaction with it makes them play differently. Otherwise, we would just all play with a clean DI and then change the sound afterwards. I know Absolutely. That's an exaggerated point, and I think that that's something to admit. And you said that earlier about, it even goes back to like the cheaper mics. Like I was saying, like the 691 is now a very expensive microphone. But when I bought it, it was $150, and I shipped it from Germany like 15 years ago. And to be honest, that's all it's worth. But it's become like this, you know, holy grail of microphones. I think the 582 actually is a really good option for a KM series if you can't afford a 53, a 54, or 56, because it's tube and it's very similar. You know more about it than me. But the 691 is this really aggressively bright, you know, microphone that has a great use. But I would never recommend it for anything other than acoustic guitars. Right. You know, it's horrible on everything else.
I hear you. Yeah.
So anyway, you get my point. So I do understand the science, and I think that's where we get lost, because I think everybody's right. The guy that's saying digital is fantastic, or I'm exaggerating, and the guy that's saying analog is fantastic, they're both right. Because the guy that's recording on tape, or the girl, the people who record on tape, love tape because of everything you just said, sonically what it does. Also the way, the mindset you go into when you walk into a room and you can't fix everything. When I've used tape, my performers start listening to each other a little bit more. They come into the control room, they listen to the playback, and they go, you know, the bass isn't locking the kick in the chorus, you need to lay back, or more importantly, maybe you want to get on top and drive it a bit harder, as opposed to like, oh, you'll just fix that later. There's so much more to it. So I actually think everybody is always right. When a guy goes, I love digital, and I'm right, he is right. And when a guy goes, I only love tape, and it's better, he's also right. You know what I'm saying? There's so much more to it. And
it's just a tool. And my point about the shootout that we did, was absolutely not that one is better. That was not my point. My point was,
I know.
if you have a stake in it or you're an interest in it, go listen and decide for yourself, because there isn't a right or a wrong. It's what you want to hear and how you want your workflow to go.
Yeah, yeah. And so here's somebody making a joke, but it's kind of funny. Paul Lucas just said, if the mic looks cool, you might get a better performance. Just kidding. Well, the hilarious thing is, though, he's kind of right when I was just talking about the 47. When people ask me that it's so expensive and all this kind of stuff, they do get timid. Younger artists get a little afraid when they're singing into this museum piece. I think that's important. So even though his point is a joke, there's also a little bit to it. And I think that's what's great with the you know, maybe using handheld mics, using SM7s, you know, we were talking about before. All right, so I went off on that tangent, I'm sorry, but it was just I wanted to yeah, I mean, guys are saying, yeah, I suppose it doesn't matter what the gear is, it just depends on how good the performance is. That's very true. Gear is secondary, people are saying that, yep. I mean, these are all very good points. It's just, it really just comes down to, yeah, somebody's saying if you recorded the Beatles with an Edison cylinder, it still would have been good. Yeah, I mean, Jerry Hammock, who wrote that book on recording Beatles, when he went back to all the assistant engineers, because he talked to the assistants, he did a different way, like guys that were there, like cataloging everything, and he went back to the track sheets and got a different perspective from the engineers, which I thought was really interesting. And he said that what people failed to realize and forget is we got so used to multi-track recording from late 60s on that even though they were multi-track recording, the basis of every song they ever recorded was still live. It was still live drums, live bass, live, usually 2 guitars or 1 guitar and piano, all went down live. So the whole feel and groove of a Beatles song, no matter what it was, with a couple of exceptions, obviously, like Tomorrow Never Knows, tape loops and stuff. But most of what they recorded, even right up to the very end, was still live performances. So yes, that is the most important thing. It's not the tape. The other thing that Jeff Emmerich said when asked about the cheap AKG he used, he said, "What, you know, it's an amazing mic," and he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "But I used it because it was plugged in." I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, people get very precious about the gear sometimes. And it's fun, but it's all about the performance.
Right. All right. So I'm sorry about that tangent. I think this is a good question I want to ask that people are sort of implying here. Do you have any, and you maybe you don't want to give this away, but I'm sure you will. Do you have any sleeper mics, like old microphone, like a old Chinese, Japanese, American, a maligned mic that maybe is kind of ignored that you're like, oh, this is actually really good on this or that? Some audio tips, as it were.
You know, wow, I don't know that I do. You know, everyone's got favorite microphones. I don't know that they're unknown or anything like that. I mean,
well, they might be unknown to our audience because I'm still learning. There's a couple of things you talked about earlier. I didn't know anything about how those capsules were made or any of that stuff.
So I do have a couple of favorites I brought out in case this came up. So this is unfortunately completely unobtainium. This is a Biodynamic M380. It's made from a headphone element, which is why it looks like, you know, the side of a headphone. It was a giant transducer element. I don't know if it's that big actually, but so it's bidirectional. It's a dynamic bidirectional microphone. And the proximity effect is out of this world. If you put this close to something, the bass tilt is up like 12 dB. It's insane on bass cab or bass drum.
Wow.
And it's amazing actually on guitar cab too. I put this into a guitar shootout years ago, and the engineer, you know, we were hearing every dynamic mic you've ever heard of, and then we put this, and he was like, "What the hell was that?" Because it was a sound like he'd never heard. It was huge, and the sense of space is different because it's bidirectional. So you're getting some, you know, there's a lobe out the back as well. Anyway, so that's a favorite of mine that I unfortunately don't get to use. I don't get to use all that much anymore. I also wanted to give a shout out, and I do love a good dynamic. This is the Electro Voice ND468, very common. They just recreated this, and I don't know what the new one is called. But what I love about this is, it sounds incredible. It's great on vocals. It's great on, I don't mean like in a studio sense, but if you had to sing through something, this would not screw you. But I love it on toms because it has this nifty yoke mount on the capsule. So where normally you'd have your drum and you'd have your typical mic, your 421, for example, or a 57, and it's coming in. If the drummer likes to keep his cymbals low, that mic is in the way. There's just no way around it because the mic is that long, and then there's a cable coming out the back, and yeah, you can get a 90-degree XLR, that helps, but this is awesome because you can have this just up over the edge of the drum, and the whole thing's out of the way, and then the XLR is coming out the bottom. So, and they sound great. So it's not just about convenience. These things sound amazing. It's the ND468. So, and now that they don't make this anymore because they've recreated it, maybe you find them for cheaper.
Not for very long.
Yeah, they're all sold out now.
I went to Valgaray. I went to Valgaray's studio about a year ago, and Val, obviously one of the greatest engineers that ever lived, made some of the best sounding records ever. He goes, oh, let me tell you a couple of secrets. And he brings out an SM53 and says, this is what I've used on every electric guitar I've ever recorded. Mm-hmm. They were like $100 on eBay when he told me. When the video came out, they were like $400 or $500. Yeah. And then, because it only takes like 20 people to suddenly start bidding. You know, it's not like the whole world knew. But then those little Sony, those little Sony clip-on mics, he's like, that's the sound of James Taylor's acoustic. They suddenly all sold out and got really expensive. It's quite funny. It's great to know because, I mean, who doesn't love the sound of James Taylor's acoustic?
Really?
Yeah, it's amazing. Cascade, Fatheads. I actually used those on room mics and really enjoyed them. Have you had a chance to play with those?
Yeah, the Fathead is really popular. And I know Michael at Cascade, and I'm good friends with Ken Levy, who was the guy who did all their trade shows for years and years.
Great.
In fact, Ken, you may have seen him. Ken was at my booth, so he comes out and helps out with Roswell when we do trade shows.
Lovely.
Yeah, I like Cascade. The Fathead is, I mean, you have to give it props for basically reintroducing the world to ribbons. Now, Royer really should get that credit, but the R121 is expensive. It's $1,000 or $1,200 now. Whereas the Fathead is, the BE is $179 or $229 or something like that. I mean, it's cheap. It's affordable. What's great about the Fathead is it gives people a chance to check out a ribbon mic at a price that anyone can afford, and you can finally hear why everybody loves ribbon mics on acoustic guitar. Now, the ribbon motor that's in the Fathead tends to be a little cloudy, a little mid-forward, which is probably why people love it on acoustic. So I find it to not be a great all-purpose sound. I think electric guitar cab is a great application for that. And if you've never had a ribbon on electric guitar, that's probably the one to try. If you have a little bit larger budget, Cascade makes one called the Vinjet, and it's the taller style.
A couple of guys were asking me about that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, so we did one of the most ambitious / insane projects we ever did with Recording Hacks was something that we called the $60,000 ribbon mic shootout. And we had like 30 different microphones and 40 something microphones in all. And so you can hear the Vinjet and the Fathead and 30 other mics on 6 or 7 different sources.
Somebody's saying here that the cloud lifter on the Fathead is a game changer for them.
Yeah, you know, I should have mentioned this in my tips. I've been pimping the cloud lifter for years. I have 2 of these. These are awesome. If you ever use ribbons or dynamics, you should have this in your signal chain because it gives you a bunch of free gain and it just sounds great. And also Roger Cloud is one of the nicest people I've ever met.
Absolutely.
So cloud lifter, you know, 3 thumbs up from me. Anyway, the Vinjet, I was going to say, is we had the one that had the Lundahl transformer upgrade. And my recollection of that, it was my pick for the sort of sub $500 space in ribbon mics. It has a more balanced frequency response than the Fathead, which means it's more versatile. It works on guitar cab, but it also works on drum overheads, and anything else you throw at it, you can certainly try it out. I mean, you know, again, no mic works on everything. That's a myth, but the Vinjet, especially with the transformer upgrade, sounds really good. And I think they were $349 when I did the review. So yeah, that's great. And the nice thing about Cascade is there's no risk. Like if you were to buy a even lower priced or an eBay kind of mic, the ribbons are often blown on those things. So if you take the mic and you sort of, if you pretend this was a ribbon and you plug it in, you put the headphones on and you go like this, and you hear it clunk, that means that that ribbon is doing this kind of footbridge sagging, and when you turn it over, it falls and collapses, and you'll hear that. So if your ribbon mic does that, get it fixed, get it re-ribboned, or just toss it and buy a new one. Anyway, yeah, Vinjet, that was my favorite.
Great, thanks for bringing that up, because that came up a lot. I've got a guy here asking specifically about SM7, saying that he sings metal, old school rock, but he also says opera as well. He has a couple of things. He was like, would he still need the cloud lifter, bearing in mind he's a trained singer who can sing super loud?
It's hard to say. It depends on your preamp. What I found is that the cloud lifter gave me cleaner gain than my preamp did, even a nice preamp, because the cloud lifter gives you about 20 decibels and sometimes 25, depending on a lot of factors.
Oh wow, that's fantastic.
Now, if you're recording to 24-bit digital, you don't need to be knocking on the door of the red, right? You can be at -10 and still get enough signal level. So I'm not suggesting that you need the cloud lifter so that you're peaking all your meters. That's not the point. The point is, if you do need more gain than your preamp is giving you, chances are the cloud lifter is going to give you cleaner gain than if you turn your preamp up to 11.
Right. Somebody's saying here, Chris Henry, and I understand his point. He's saying, it's a good idea to go for used microphones of a higher quality. But he did say you could get a 414 to $400 to $500 used. I've never seen one that cheap. If you did, I'd buy one. It was one for $400.
Yeah.
So 414 is usually more like 7 or 8.
I haven't followed the used market. What I will say, I'll express some caution there. I've bought a bunch of used mics on eBay because for recording hacks, I got tired of being limited to what the manufacturer would tell me about the product. So I would just go buy them on eBay and open them up and say, oh, this is what's inside. So when you go to the recording hack site and you see the photos of the capsule and the circuit board, that's because I bought the mic and shot the photo. So which is why I've got a locker with 200 cheap mics in it. What I found though is that sometimes you'll get a mic in and the capsule looks like it went through the dishwasher or was left out after you brushed the cat and then it rained. Just corroded with just crap. And do you hear that? People say no, the U-47 from 1953 probably has some of that on there too, because people have been singing into it and spitting on it for 50 years. But a mic that's 4 years old that looks like that, something went wrong. So you'd want to have a return policy on that, or have someone else look at it, or ask the seller to take it apart and photograph what it is, because you just don't know what you're going to get. Yeah,
it's an interesting one. So we have a U-48, and this U-48, have the 47 there, but we also have a U-48, and this U-48 was used at Echo Park Studios in Indiana, in Bloomington. Mm-hmm. And we did How to Save a Life with the Fray using this mic. So when we came to do the second Fray album, we rented that mic from them, even though we did it in Sausalito at the record plant.
Yeah.
So we rented the mic, and then actually it had a pair of them, consecutive serial number U-48. So, a couple of things I'm going to say. Firstly, they sounded completely, 100%, utterly different. These are consecutive serial number U-48s, same owners, same pedigree. They had bought them, I think, from one owner from New, who had used them as a pair. And the point was, now, this is, I believe there was 750 U-48s made and 10,000 U-47s. So these are as rare as rocking horse schnizzle, as my dad used to say, rare as rocking horse. Anyway, so here we have, totally consecutive serial number, same pedigree, same owners, totally different sound. The one we preferred, and this is where you're going to laugh, was darker, probably because the capsule was dirtier, had been used more, but it sounded, quote unquote, you're going to hate this, warmer. I hate using the word warmer, but I'm going to say it because warmer is this ridiculous, you know. Anyways, but it just sounded fatter in the track. It just seemed to sound like, because Isaac has that voice. We came to do that song, I found God. He's got that voice when the corner of First and Armistead, and he's spitty. It's and this mic just sounded beautiful on his voice. So we're probably using the not so good capsule, or whatever. I don't know. I'm not an expert. But it definitely had a bigger sound, meaning lots more lows and low mids. You know, took up more room in the track.
Yeah.
But it took EQ beautifully. So you could boost the top end and the openness came back there. So it was definitely printing. It wasn't like it wasn't there. Anyway, cut a long story short, it got left in Harmony, the studio down there, where it still is, and it gets used every day. Adele came in, did Someone Like You.
Wow.
Recorded on that, which last time I checked was the biggest selling single of the last blah, 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 blah years. #1 in 13 countries. With that same dark mic, that same not so clean capsule, you know what I mean? And so it's sitting in down there. Then I did almost all the vocals on the Aerosmith record using it as well. And the point is like nobody ever complained about the mic. It's a real weird one, isn't it? It's like one of those, and it hasn't been cleaned.
Well,
Nobody's come in there. Yeah, I know, exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, it could be dirty, but clearly, if it sounds good, it is good, right? There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But the thing to remember about those old German microphones, and the reason why the consecutive serial number thing is a myth, is that those capsules were made by a German guy with a beard and a big leather apron and a drill and hand tools. And so theoretically, consecutive serial numbered mics were made one after the other, and probably he did the same thing. But the truth is, if some of those blind holes in the capsule were a little deeper, or if you pushed too hard and the bit wobbled, which is a thing, and then the hole is bigger because you push too hard, then the capsule is going to sound different in very subtle ways, which could give it more warmth, you know, or less top end. Diaphragm tension plays in there. Crud and buildup could be it. Could be a circuit issue too. I don't know, but yeah, microphones of that vintage especially, they could be wildly different. David Bach, who everyone probably knows from Bach Audio and Sound Deluxe now, he tells a great story about when he sat down to develop his version of the 251 for Sound Deluxe way back in the day. He went out and rented a half dozen 251s and was dismayed to find that they all sound completely different, because then the question is, well, which one is mine supposed to sound like? They're all different. So
yeah, I agree. And we had that same experience. And the reason why we ended up getting the 48 flown in, you know, so dramatic, you know, flown into the studio, the plant in Sausalito. The reason why we get it is because we arrived there. One of the selling points of the studio, and understandably so, is it's where they done songs in the key of life. It's where they did most of Rumors. Sly lived there and did Fresh. So it just had this incredible pedigree. So we were so excited, and we were in the room where all these records were made. Mm-hmm. And one of the selling points was like, we have all of the original microphones. We've got them all. And they had, right. I don't know if it was 4 or 5 U47s, and they assured us they knew which one was the one that Stevie sung on, you know, that did all those beautiful stuff. So we were very excited. So what did? We did what anybody would do. We got there, we got the 4 or 5 47s, and we stuck them all up together, and we, you know, we put them through 1073s and printed them, you know, sung on each one of the ones, and then went back, you know, just called them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever, and went back and listened to them all, and they all sounded completely and utterly different, obviously. Like, not just, one could have been a C12 and one could have been a 67. That right. is how different these mics sounded. And I'm sorry if people are going to disagree with me and say that's not possible. You can tell me I'm wrong, but honestly, they just sounded so different to each other. And because they sounded so different, we got nervous. And more importantly, the artists got nervous. They were like, they just sold 4 million albums, and here they are making their follow-up record, which is like a career do or die moment for them. Yeah. So much pressure. So what did they do? They were like, you know what? Screw this. We don't know if we like the sound of any of these. They all sound so different. The one that's the Stevie Wonder one doesn't sound as good as that one. Yeah. So let's just fly in the other mic. And we flew in the other mic, and we had the same vocal chain, literally the same gear. And it was done to Pro Tools. So we knew we were going to get the same results. And that's all a bunch of baloney, obviously, because he could have picked up an SM57 and also sung amazingly, as we know, to our earlier points. However, psychology, and it's such a big deal with what we do.
Well, that's being a producer, yeah. Looking at it not just from the perspective of gear, but the thing about all the mics sounding different is totally believable and not at all surprising, because these things were built in the late 40s, probably. And so do they have, I mean, are they all factory fresh? Yeah, there's no way. Some of those tubes have gone out and been, not replaced with the V14 because you can't get those anymore. So they had to put something else in, an EF14. Oh, but the voltage doesn't work, so you have to rewire the mic. And then as long as we're in there, that capacitor looks like it's leaking, right? Or, your PVC diaphragm on your old M7 capsule is getting brittle, and that massively changes the sound. So let's put in some other K47, or maybe even the Neumann K47, whatever it is. But yeah, if you take those things apart, I bet you'll find not 6 different sounding mics, but 6 different microphones underneath.
That's, yeah. I'm glad that I wasn't completely crazy. Okay, so everybody, lots of really positive stuff. Everybody's agreeing with the general sentiments here. I'm going to run to the restroom and give you this question. See if you can
freestyle.
And I'll do you the same. I'll do you the same in return if you need to. Somebody's asking about some of the high-end stuff, and they're talking specifically. You mentioned Bach, and I'm glad that you pay respect to that, because I've always loved Bach's. And DeGram 707 says, "Have you touched on Brawner yet? Do you have any thoughts about the Brawner range?"
Give me one more question before you go, because I can't go for 3 minutes on Brawner.
Oh, okay, cool. A lot of people talking about effects and how that you hear things, and I think that's really cool. Total understand. That's a good subject. Maybe you can speak to this. Couple of things. I had to do a lot of live mixing over the years. In fact, I should probably put this on my website, but I've done a schnizzle load of live projects. Like I mixed Black Veil Brides, who are like, I mean, one of the biggest, if not the biggest modern rock band in the world. I mixed their live stuff that we recorded, but I would do all the Fray stuff when they were huge. They would send me stuff and they'd release it as ultimate stuff. And often I had to, in the middle of a vocal, which he's singing on a 58 at a piano, there'll be a dropout. Whether it was the recording or whether it was just him turning his head away, cymbal bleed, and I would have to take words or sometimes whole lines from the album, which I had, and drop them in it. Now, that's a U48, 1073, DBX 160, 1176 in a beautiful environment with no bleed, with a pair of nice headphones on, isolation headphones, dropped into a 57, or well, probably, sorry, a 58 live with the whole band bleeding into it. And I challenge anybody on this planet to go back and listen to that stuff and tell me which is the different mic and where it got dropped in. I think this person's making a couple of points about EQ, compression, and effects. And I'm not taking anything away from the quality of the microphones, but yes, when you're in like a live setting or even lots of bleed and stuff like that, there's so many other factors that can really affect it, and the processing afterwards can make or break a great microphone.
Yeah, that's you probably just plugged your recorded track into a mic modeling plugin, right? And dialed up 58 with stage noise.
I was mixing in those days on a Neve 8058. I used to have an 8058, you know, the channel. It's still my favorite console I've had. I mean, I've got a SSL 4000, which I love. I have a Kadak 12 channel, which is unfreaking believable. Hopefully next time you're in LA, you can come by and check everything out. The thing about the 58, the 8058, is I would do a little, in a hybrid fashion, I do a little bit of EQ and de-essing in the console, but the sound of the Neve, especially when pushed hard by a digital source, great thing about digital is not a dynamic range, so I could hit it really hard. I put a very loud signal, almost audibly clipping into my console, and it imparted such a big difference with all the EQ and compression that I applied there, that even going between mics, you know what I mean, there was a lot being done. And then, tons of verb to reinforce the live sound, tons of delays.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to be George Martin to know where it changed.
All right, well, let me chat about that stuff for a bit. You take your break, and
thank you.
I'll try to take over. So the first question was about Bronner. Now, Bronner's a great German company. One thing I like about their line is that they presented, I haven't looked at this in a while, but as I recall, they sort of present it as, here's our cleaner stuff, and here's our more colored stuff. And I find that distinction actually really useful because, and I guess this applies to our earlier point, this applies somewhat less to the guy, to the artist who wants to buy one mic that's the perfect mic for me, as opposed to the home studio guy who's looking to build up a competent studio's worth of gear so that as various artists and bands and voiceover guys come in, they have the right gear for that application. So two different audiences there. You know, so I'll answer it both ways. For the artist, unfortunately, there's nothing to be done but to try a bunch of stuff and find out what works for you. And so in the case of Bronner, you know, you try one from their cleaner, you know, more neutral / modern sort of side, and then try one from their more, you know, flattering or colored side, and see what complements your voice or instrument. Now, for the engineer, you'd want one of each, right? So here's the doomsday scenario for a home studio guy. I think I mentioned this before. You know, you put the microphone up on the guitar, and you record a bit, and you listen back, and it sounds bad because the strings are brand new and they're super bright and edgy and cutting, and you hear all kinds of pick noise or all kinds of finger sliding noise, or conversely, the strings are 15 years old and you're hearing this kind of dull, thuddy sound, right? And your microphone doesn't complement that. Now, in the second case, what you want to do is take off your nice neutral ribbon mic that's rolled off on top. You know, if the microphone is really big, boomy, and dull, and you want to put up something that's really bright and clean and articulate to try to bring out those characteristics that the instrument's not giving you. In the former case, where the mic is really bright or it has new strings or something like that, or it's a little parlor guitar, then maybe you want to take off the U87 AI or the super bright pencil mic that you've got up there, and you want to put up a ribbon, right? So for the studio guys, what you want is to have a more diverse mic locker that allows you to have something to reach for that complements whatever the source is. So if you go back to the Bronner line, they have sort of both classes, and you'd want to try one from each category and try to build some diversity into your mic locker that way. So Warren, we were just talking about having a diverse mic locker, and that ties into Bronner because they sort of split their product line into those two camps, the cleaner, more modern versus the sort of more colored sound.
Oh, they do?
That's my recollection that they do, yeah. Yeah,
we had I don't know what it's called. Like it was one of the most expensive Brauners. I didn't own it, but I think the band did. Aerosmith, the band owned this mic, and I did like it. I think that it was probably too good. Does that make sense? I think you understand what I mean. It was like so good and so detailed and so fantastic.
But it's not.
What was interesting though. Yeah, because Stephen's like, you know, everybody knows how he sings. And the thing about Stephen, just if anybody is interested who's a fan, is he's a self-comper. What he does is he sings a verse, and if he makes a mistake, he stops and goes back and punches it in and fixed. So basically, after an hour of singing, the song is also comped, which from a production and engineering standpoint is absolutely beautiful, because there's nothing worse than sitting there for 10 hours trying to comp 100 takes of vocals together.
Yeah.
As much as I love it sometimes. So he would self-comp. So the point was, and he liked to hear things the way they're going to be. Mm-hmm. All the rough mixes, everything he hears in his headphones, has to be like, he has to be inspired. Like he wants to hear the effects on his vocal. He wants to hear the compression, the EQ. He's been doing this a long time and he's smart. Yeah. So he's like, give me the sound of a record in my headphones or go and figure it out now. You know what I mean? He's quite demanding because he's used to, he's used to Jay Messina. Jay Messina is inarguably one of the greatest engineers that ever lived. You know, he makes Steely Dan records, for goodness sake. You know what I mean? So anyway, so you know, talk about, you know, standing on the shoulders of giants. But right. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of. So I think that the broader stuff, and that was honestly. So I've only got that one experience, which was the very, very high end Bronner, which I think if I was working with an R&B pop singer that had an incredible voice and I didn't want to color it and leave that maybe for mixing. I don't know if there was a better mic I personally ever heard. It was one of the greatest, purest mics I'd ever heard. With Stephen, he was used to singing on a 67. The strangest thing was he ended up singing on the 48, and he had never in his career used a 47 or 48, which I find truly remarkable.
Yeah.
In 40 plus years.
That is amazing. You'd think he'd have come across one along the way with one of those 20 or 30 albums that he's made.
I think the 67 for the most part was such a big sound of rock and roll for so many artists. I mean, my old friend, God rest his soul, Brian Karlstrom, had, I think, the best 67 I'd ever heard. I don't remember who does the mods. Is it Klaus? Anyway, he'd had it modded. It had a little bit more output, and it just was amazing. And that he had that mic, and he used it on Alice in Chains. He used it on Jane's Edition. He did the Alice in Chains. He used it on like Offspring, tons of rock records in the 90s. And so there's definitely something about a 67, which is one of those mics that is great for rock because there's so many great rock singers. Also, Jonathan Wilson, I'll quickly finish. Sorry. Jonathan Wilson told me that when he was working with Nigel Godrich, sorry if I'm giving away backstage secrets here, Jonathan, but Jonathan told me that Nigel uses a 67 on pretty much everything. And he just said he just kind of like just takes it around and puts it on different instruments. So like, you know, when they were doing like the Roger Waters record, it was like this over here, move it over there, put it on this, put it on that, put it on this, put it on that. So I think there's definitely something to be said for the 67. Hey, I'm dumb. Is the 67 and the 87 the same capsule? Everything else is different, or is it slightly changed?
It is the same capsule. The 67 is, of course, a tube circuit, so that's a big difference. But it is the same capsule. Now, purists will argue there's a subtle difference from old U87 to new U87. And the difference is that the current shipping U87 AI, which I want to say came out in, it's on the website, I don't remember, 76? I don't remember. Anyway, it has a DC multiplier. So they can take the 48 volts phantom input and turn it into 60 volts, but more importantly, turn it into plus and minus 60, which gives you figure 8. The older U87, it ran on phantom power, but it did not have that DC converter. And so they didn't have 60 volts. They only had whatever was left, phantom minus whatever was needed by the JFET and that part of the circuit, which ends up being around 40 or 42 volts, I believe. And so they had to split the capsule in two. That was the only way they could do it. So the older U87i had the same K67 capsule, and I'm sorry, I'm in the weeds, let me get out of here. They insulated the two backplates from each other. So it's electrically two separate capsules with 4 wires, 2 wires per side. The U67 didn't need that because it had its own power supply that was sending in, 200 volts or whatever. And then the new U87 doesn't because it's got the DC converter in there. So, but basically, essentially, same capsule from an audio perspective, and it sounds the same. Yeah.
Do you think? I suppose I'm just a dumb question because everybody's thinking this. I'm sure all of those things that you're describing as differences, even though the capsule's the same, do they make a sonic difference?
I would say, in my experience, actually, I've never tested it to see, but what's changed is that the material that was used between the two backplate halves changed from metallic to non-metallic. So it used to be electrically shorted together, and now it's insulated. The spacing is the same. I believe it sounds the same. There were other circuit differences that would account for the differences in EQ. And yes, I've heard the difference between a U87i, which is the old one, and a U87ai, which is the new one. We did that shootout years ago for Recording Hacks. You can hear the two on vocals. They may have been different performances, but we did vocals and voiceover and acoustic guitar, I think. Yeah, they are slightly different. The older mic was a little darker. The newer one's a little brighter, a little more articulate. But I think those are circuit differences more than capsule.
Oh, okay. I'm reading all the different things. Oh yeah, somebody's saying they remember watching the shootout. Ron Mockridge who's an Academy member, said, would that be called the touch shell bass? I don't know what that is. Or two shell or touch shell bass.
Yeah, Tuchel. I don't know that the
Tuchel,
U87 okay. ever had that. The old tube mics had a different connector.
Right.
What most people now are used to is the XLR. It could be that the old U87s had the different connector as well. I honestly don't know. The tube mics tended to. The fat mics, I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah, I'm not an expert. I didn't know what that meant, so that's why I was throwing it back over to you. Okay, I'm going back through the mics. Back through the questions. Oh, you know what? I have a question. I don't know the answer to this, and people are going to look at me. What are all the differences between the 414, the ULQ51? I actually don't know the answer, and if everybody on this chat knows the differences, they can laugh at me. But I go to a studio and I ask for a pair of 414s, and they put them up on overheads or piano or whatever I'm using them on, and that's what happens.
Yeah.
But what is the differences between all the different versions?
Oh my God! So it's no simple answer, because there's not one or two. There's like 8. Okay.
Really?
Yeah. So there was the old. The EB is kind of the favorite, the 414 EB, and it has a very flat frequency response, and that's widely regarded, even among 414 haters, as the good one, like the last good one is the way I've heard that one described.
Wow.
And then they went into the ULS and the BLS and the BULS, and I half wrote a 5,000 word essay that would answer your question. I never finished it because I just wanted to put a gun to my head. Yeah, there's too many, and they have different capsules too now. So they made 2 different ones, and one is transformerless, and I assume the other one probably has a transformer. I'm not. I don't own the newest. I don't own any 414s. I probably wouldn't buy the more recent 5 or 10 years worth, only because I don't really get them. So it's a tough question, but yes, they are radically different. They sound different, and there's at least 2 substantially different microphones that are being sold as the 414 right now. And so it's hard to know what you're going to get. I mean, yeah, let me take that back. It's not hard to know what you're going to get. If you say, give me a 414 and they throw something up, you don't know what it is. It could be one of several different sounding things. So the 414 buyer needs to educate himself on what the differences are and what they sound like, because they do sound different, and one 414 is not the same as the next. And in fact, neither of the 2 being made today sounds like the old ones. So.
Oh wow. Well, I don't own any 414s. That's actually, I'm going to double response here. That's the reason why I bought a pair of those Lewitts, because I heard them and they sounded like a generic 414, but brand new, under half the price. And I was like, I just couldn't justify spending $1,200 on a 414.
Yeah.
Because I wanted a pair, and the 550s were like $500 or $600. So that's the reason why, because I just wanted a generic pair. However, I am also blessed, and this is the second part of the question to you, I'm also blessed to own a pair of C12As. So my question is the original, and I could be completely wrong, but it's an assumption, is the original 414, the EB or whatever it's called, is that the same as an 87 to a 67? Is the 414 EB the same to a C12A? Is it the non-tube version of a C12A is my question.
I don't know. It's been a while since I've researched the old C12. I'm just looking on my site. I don't think I even have notes on that mic. So that one I haven't gotten to yet. I'm sorry.
C12A. Oh, that's okay. I mean, I love them. You know, I use them a lot. In fact, they sit on my toms at the moment, which people are going to think is crazy because they're very expensive microphones.
Risky. Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily, I don't hit them. But they do sound phenomenal. But they're a vocal mic as well. I mean, I've used them. Very famously, Freddie Mercury used them quite often, so I'm a big fan. But all right, well, we'll table that one for the time being. I do love my C12As though. I'm reading more questions. Said the old version is handmade in Vienna. New mass-produced one is built on a factory conveyor belt. Talking about 414s. Well, I did hear, I'm sure you heard as well, that AKG have closed, or I think they may have closed by now, the original AKG factory. Which is
I
very
didn't
sad.
know that. Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, it's very sad. I actually was surprised. I was having a conversation with somebody about it. I thought, why not just become even more boutique and make handmade, high-end Austrian mics, and then build just cheaper stuff in China if that's what you want to do. I was surprised they did. I thought I would double down and make some really great boutique material. Maybe go back and remake C12s the way they were made. You know, but what do I know? I'm only I'm just an end user like all the rest of us.
Right.
Oh yeah, the KSM 32s. People are talking about that. I actually had a great time with those.
Yeah,
I used those on rooms.
If I recall, he likes those mics a lot.
Who does?
Ronan Chris Murphy.
The KSM 32s, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's a big fan of those. Yeah, that's, as I recall, that's a small diaphragm electret in a large diaphragm body. I've heard good things. I've never used one. But you know, the great thing about Shure is, as I mentioned before, they test the hell out of everything. They've got machines that will take, you know, like the Shure earbuds. I don't have a little earbud thing, but they'll have a machine that'll sit there and do this for 48 hours to make sure the cable still works. They have a mic stand that's got a lever, a drop clutch lever thing on it. So when you step on it, the whole mic stand goes like that, and the mic hits the floor from a height of 6 feet.
Wow.
They have a block of concrete in their lab, and it's outside of Chicago. And when I was visiting, and they said, you got to do the drop test. And so we put a brand new 58, like fresh off the production line. And I was like, really? You want me to mash a 58? And they were like, hey, it'll sound the same. And so I stepped on the thing, and it hits, and they pick it up, and it's got a big flat side on it, and put it up. Yep, sounds like a 58. So they test everything.
I can attest to that. I remember when I first started gigging in London, playing in bands and stuff, you go to clubs and there'd be 58s that were like completely flattened, or like the whole grill was half ripped off, and one, two, sounded exactly the same. Yeah, they definitely built those like a proverbial brick, you know, schnizzle house. So I've had 3 or 4 questions that people are asking what happened with the Aurora.
Oh, the Roswell Aurora, yeah. So, so the Roswell Aurora was going to be our second microphone, and we released it and started selling it. And the day that Vintage King picked up the line, which was a feat for us. We were, you know, a new company. I know much better established brands that couldn't get into Vintage King, and so, so they liked what they heard. They were impressed, and that's awesome for us, and hopefully good for Vintage King. So anyway, they picked up the line, and they sent out a big mailer, and then said, you know, introducing this brand new company, Roswell Pro Audio, you know, boutique mics, and based in California, and here's the new mic called the Aurora. And I got a phone call like 24 hours later from someone else who makes a product with that name, and they said, you don't have the rights to use that name. And
okay, well, we all know who the company is.
I'm not naming any names at all. And they said, we have exclusive rights to that. And I said, I'm not sure that's true. I looked it up, and you know, didn't see any you know, registered trademarks. And I was told that they had the rights. And I thought, you know, I could make microphones, or I could go to court. And I called a trademark attorney, and he said, yeah, you know, you could argue it. I can't say you'd win, can't say they'd win. I mean, it's gray. Like, they don't have the sort of nuclear option. Yes, we own it, you lose, go away. So you'd have to argue it, and you'd have to do this survey, and it's going to cost you, did he tell me $100,000 to do a survey of people like, you know, you, to say, is there market confusion between between this microphone called the Aurora and this other thing that's not a microphone? And I thought, yeah, I'm not doing that. So we changed the name, and we took the opportunity to improve the mic. So the replacement is called the Delphos.
Okay, great. That explains it.
Which, you know, you've heard, I think, and we gave one away recently.
Wonderful.
And we upgraded the shock mount, and upgraded the foam in the case, because the old foam sucked, and we have this nice made in California foam that looks amazing and works better too. Upgraded the shock mount. The Aurora was painted flat black, and the new mic has this 3-stage baked on enamel Porsche dark blue metallic finish. So it looks incredible. We refined the capsule manufacturing process and tweaked the circuit a little bit. So, you know, if you liked the Aurora, the Delphos is every bit of that and better. You know, certainly better looking accessories and sounds at least as good, if not better. So that's what happened to the Aurora. So a long and sad story. And now I register all my microphone names before we release them, because I'm not getting that phone call again. You know, that's just not anything a small business guy wants to hear.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I know the company. I don't personally know anybody at the company you're talking about, but I know the product, and we both know obviously what it is, and everybody watching knows what it is. And it's a little unfortunate because it's a double whammy, because their product is, for what they make, interface, for what they make, it's a good product, and it's less expensive kind of product I can get behind. I actually have a rig that uses that product, and I bought it because the reviews were really good and it was less expensive than a product it was beating. So yeah, it's always a shame when that stuff happens. It's hard to have a resentment against a good company that has a good product. I mean, if it was the big evil empire of some massive conglomerate, maybe, yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, no, it was unfortunate, because I didn't intend to name it you know, after their product at all. I did not expect there to be market confusion. And I will say that the gentleman that called me on the phone was as nice as you could possibly be, given the context of the conversation. And he didn't want to make that phone call any more than I wanted to receive it. So it was just it was a bummer. And, you know, at the end of the day, it was my mistake for picking a name that had been used. So, you know, I wasn't familiar with their product because I'm not active in the interface market. You know, maybe I should be embarrassed. I've been using a Digio O2 for 15 years, so.
you said that word, I just coughed it. So no, they make a great product, and they're very competitive, and they allow people to get that high quality at a good price. So I'm glad you figured it out, and you made a better product on the back end out of it anyway, so that it's a win-win. But obviously a bit of a pain. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
D112. Everyone I've used has a basketball bouncing on a concrete, the D112. People are saying they prefer the Beta 52. You know what's interesting? The D112 can sound like, for me, from an hearing perspective, can sound like a basketball if you just put it in there. But if you dampen down your kick, guys, as people are talking about, the D112 is a great mic. And I do like the Beta 52 in there. I also like, what is that one that Shure make that's a PZM, a boundary mic that you just drop in there?
I thought that was the Beta, but you're right. The other, it's is it the 52A or something?
Maybe it's what it is, yeah.
I don't remember, but yeah, that's really clicky though. That the PZM that you said inside, those tend to be pretty clicky, right? Have you found that?
Yeah, definitely. I would only use a D112 for my rock kick. So what I do is I tend to, and obviously I'm spoiled. When I go into a big studio, I'm going to have 2 or 3 different sources for anything I like, because I'm spoiled. I've got a big console and loads of mics. So when I'm in those situations, I put a D112 inside, and that gives me that, and it's scoopy sounding, and I get the 60 hertz and the 2.5 and the 7, 2.5 for rock, 7 for like metal. You know, I'll do that, and then I'll have a FET on the outside head, and then quite often a Yamaha subkick or something like that. Right. We've recently been using, what's it called? I want to give them a shout out. What's it called, the subkick? Solomon. Yeah, the Solomon subkick is awesome. I got turned on to that by Glenn Fricker, which is pretty awesome. I don't know if you know that, if anybody watching.
Glenn's the man.
Yeah, Glenn's the man. Well, Glenn's another guy that you should talk to, if you haven't already, probably have, of course, is Matt Boudreau of Working Class Audio. I
know Matt. Yeah, Matt's a good guy.
Yeah, good guy. Another guy fighting the good fight, trying to help people out.
Yeah, Matt's great. The Beta 91A, that's the PZM.
Yes, somebody's saying that. Claudius, thank you, Claudius. 91A.
The other thing to consider about kick drum mics, because I've had this question too. I know people with great ears who say the D112 is the best mic ever. Of course, you know, people like Glenn love the D6, the Audix, which has a certain sound to it.
That's very clicky for me. That's a rock kick mic.
But it depends what you're trying to record. If it's, you know, the next Carpenter's record or whatever, you don't want that D6 metal sound. So it depends what you're recording. But what I found is, because what makes a kick drum mic? I mean, typically they have a big boost in the lows, and then they have another boost in the somewhere between 2 and 5 to try to capture the beater, because they're trying to get both sounds in one by damping other regions. And so where those two boosted ranges fall and how high and the amplitude of those boosts determines the sound of the mic. And so if you look at the D112, as I recall, the low end boost is at a slightly higher frequency range as compared to some other mics that have a boost lower than that. And the same with the top. And so you need to find the mic that has the ranges boosted that suit your needs. And so the D112, I mean, it's like a brighter versus a darker large diaphragm mic for vocals. You'll find that sometimes this mic is great, sometimes that mic is great. Depends on the size of the drum. Is it a felt or fiberglass or wood beater? Both diameter and depth of drum. Is it damped? Does it have a hole in the front head? Does the guy, feather it, or is he like slamming away at it? So all this stuff matters, and unfortunately, you just have to try a couple things. There is no one kick drum mic for all, any more than there's any other mic for all. So
I agree. We're trying to find it. I'm not sure where it is at the moment, but I recently, a few weeks ago, went to Sunset Sound, which is not unusual for me. I track there a lot. Went to Sunset Sound and I retracked with a bunch of teenage kids. Actually, some of them weren't even teenagers, 11 or 12 years old. A bunch of kids just retracked Van Halen 1. And we went back into the room where they tracked it, and we got the original track sheets, and we mic'd it in the same way.
That's amazing.
Guess what they were using? Guess what they were using on the drums?
I'd love to know.
All right. People are talking about 421s and 57s. Well, the kick drums, of which, of course, there was 2 for the double kick drums, were both mic'd with an SM57.
That would have been my guess.
Kick drums mic'd with an SM57.
Yeah.
The snare top, guess what the snare top and snare bottom was?
The snare bottom, maybe a 414?
Nope. Pair of 546s. Snare top and snare bottom. So, like, cheaper than a 57.
Wow.
SM46, 546, top and bottom. Maybe, you remember the 546, a lot of them used to come with the fixed cables. Remember before they had XLRs? So that was the top and bottom. And then the tom.
This was Van Halen 1, right?
Van Halen 1 and 2.
Oh, and 2. Okay.
Yeah, we had the track sheets for 2. And they assured us it was the same. They used the same miking technique because they made the albums super close together in the same room. So anyway, so 546s on the top and bottom. Overheads were a pair of 414s. Sorry, 3 414s. They had a mono overhead and stereo overheads, 3 414s.
Okay.
546 top and bottom, 451 on a hi-hat, 57s inside of the kick. That was all that was in there. 1 room mic, 1 U87, and the toms were top mic'd with a 421 and bottom mic'd with, I believe, a 546. Might have been a 57. So the total expense on the whole of the drum kit, if you want to ignore the 87 for a second, in fact, actually probably all the mics that were on the drums except for the 87 were probably about the same price as the 87. Because a pair of 414s was probably, in modern terms, about 2,200, and the rest of the 57s and the 546s probably like $600 or $700. Throw in a pair of 421s, probably about $4K for the whole kit. Yeah. And then what is a U87 these days? About $3K, so pretty close.
Yeah.
It's pretty remarkable, and no subs. I mean, they didn't have any of the benefit of the stuff. No, Claudius is saying the same thing that Jeff Emmerich said. Yeah, the best mic is the one that's closest to your hand.
Yeah. I remember I interviewed Paul Northfield years ago, and he had engineered a bunch of the old Rush albums. And he said that there were times that they would be putting 67s and 87s on toms. And I thought, man, that's especially for Neil Peart's kit, which is large. It was large even in those days. So can you imagine having 8 or 10 67s wired up on toms? Plus, if you hit one, now Neil Peart has amazing control and probably wouldn't, smack the mic. But if you did, that would be an expensive session.
Very expensive session. There was, I'll tell you off camera a joke about that, which I realize I don't one when it comes to hitting mics. It isn't appropriate for public consumption. Yeah, no, I hear exactly. I love the discussion. Yeah, look, Ralph is making a discussion about mostly it's the tuning that's at fault. I mean, on drums, that's a really, really massive point.
Yeah.
If I'm sound in the room, it doesn't matter if it's 67, 47 or a 546. If the drum goes bloop, 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 no U67 is going to save a really badly tuned tom.
No, I agree. The source has to sound good, no question.
Source has to sound good. That's a great thing. Beta 91, a boundary mic is good inside the kick or outside. Yep, that's what we were talking about. Yeah, Chris says getting the drum sounding in the room is what it's all about. Then miking, definitely. Chris was talking about earlier, what did he say for a mic? Yeah, everybody's saying the same thing. Keys in the tuning of the drums. Just give me a bag of 57s. I can record drums. Question from Matt and Warren. Doing a cover of Lennon's Imagine, miking a Baldwin acoustic piano. I have a Rode NT1 and a Behringer B2 Pro. Any thoughts on mic positioning? That's a tough one. I mean, the thing about Imagine is, first of all, one of the engineers, well, in fact, two of the three engineers that worked on that session, Roy Sakala, unfortunately, he's one of the great unsung heroes of engineering, died about 4 or 5 years ago of cancer in Brazil. But his longtime engineering buddies are two of my best friends, Shelley Yakis and Jack Douglas. Both Shelley and Jack were also engineers on the Imagine session. So I can tell you what they told me was they don't remember what the mic was. It was probably, again, whatever was to hand. I can ask them again and get options of what it might be. But I will say one of the most important things that is not talked about, or I try to talk about that song, is Roy mixed it with John in the room, did a mix of the song and a vocal. John was probably like, yep, great, left. And then Roy Sakala, on his own, decided that it didn't sound Beatley enough. It didn't sound, and this is me, this isn't words that I heard, this is the Warren interpretation. Wanted to make it a little weirder. So what did he do? He took the whole mix, the final mix, the okayed mix, and put a tape slap on the whole thing. So now go back and listen to Imagine, and everything has tape slap on it. The drums, the piano, because it's the whole mix with a tape slap on it. Wow. So I think when it comes down to miking the piano, if it's an upright piano, I personally use an AEA because mine is a super bright, crappy, cheap Baldwin piano worth of whopping like $50. So I pull back an AEA just a little bit, about that far away, so it gets kind of a globalish view of it. And that always seems to sound great to me. Now, given a Rode and a Behringer, I would still stay in mono. That would be my answer. I wouldn't use both of them. I think trying to balance those two varyingly different microphones is not going to give you good stereo imagery. I don't know how you feel, Matt, but it doesn't seem to me to make any sense to take a Rode and an NT1 and try stereo mic. I would probably put them up together, pull them back a foot back from the piano. I like hearing the hammers. That's just me on the frame. I would open up the case. I'd pull them back a foot or two back, put them together, monitor both of them, and choose which one you prefer the sound of. I personally wouldn't try and stereo mic an upright, and especially given two wildly different mics. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but I can't imagine an NT1 and a Behringer B2 Pro are anything like sounding the same.
Do they sound the same? I have no idea. They, depending on vintage, they are both transformerless circuits with a bright capsule, so they follow the same recipe.
Oh, okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that they sound the same at all. They could be crazy different, but they're both basically, the circuits are linear, transformerless, low noise, low coloration, no mojo at all from the circuit, with a bright capsule on top. So
right.
It's worth a try if you know how to mic a piano in stereo. It's worth a try. I mean, put it up. Listen to it in stereo, collapse it to mono, see how that sounds. It's worth checking out.
Okay, in that case then, so if what Matt's saying is that they could be similar-ish, I would do, for phase, polarity, I would do an XY. I think I would just pull it back, like I'm saying, a couple of feet back or a foot back, so it doesn't hit doesn't hit the guy playing the piano in the head, you know,
Yeah.
but bring it back about here, and then just get the capsules so they're on top of each other, then just XY them like that, you know, with this kind of angle, and you'll get near as darn it the same. They'll hit the capsules at the same time,
Right.
so you shouldn't get any polarity, any phase cancellation, any polarity issues. That's what I would do, and you could then, yeah, and as exactly as Matt was saying, then what you should do is take those, pan them left and right, do it, and then bring them both in on mono and see if you hear any phase cancellation. If you really, for fun, want to try it, put your trim tool on and in a split mono trim tool and flip the polarity on one of them and see how much they cancel each other out. If they get quite a lot of cancellation, that's kind of nice. But you won't get entire cancellation because there's only a bit in the middle where they will cross. The center of the piano will be being picked up by both, but the far edges will be pretty minimal in both of the microphones. So yeah, I didn't know that. See, that's why you have smart guys like Matt who can tell you that these microphones are of similar kind of designs, which I never would have known. Okay, great. There's a lot of fantastic questions here and observations. Oh yeah, somebody's talking about the DTP 640 Rex. I like that microphone. It's a Lewitt mic that has both has two capsules in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have the first generation version of that. I haven't used it a ton. I think it's a great idea to phase align the two capsules, and you tune one for the beater and one for the shell. Certainly worth playing with. Yeah, Audio Technica, I believe, has one of those as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a neat idea.
It is good. Cameron Webb likes Audio Technica mics on drums. So does CJ Vanston. And they're both obviously great drum recorders. Oh, look. Sorry, guys. I know my internet connection is awful today, but here it is.
That's the track sheet?
That's the track sheet.
Wow.
Can you read any of that? It's like you can see 546. You can see this little thing here which says the 414s. EB. Just to look, it actually says EB.
That's it.
So
that's the
question. Yeah. It's got overhead left, overhead right, EB. So there you go. It's got kick. Oh my goodness. I'm wrong. The kick is not a 57. It's not a 57. It's a 546.
Wow.
Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. So next time you listen to You Really Got Me, and you hear that great drum sound, or you hear that beginning, crazy Alex doing that crazy thing, that was recorded with a pair of 546s. Like at that time, possibly one of the cheapest dynamic microphones available. There wasn't really many people making dynamics compared with Shure. I mean, when I was a kid, you could pick up 546s used in England for about £30. That's crazy. So it was. I thought it was 57s. Thank you, Eric, for finding that. But yeah, it's a pair of 546s, one on each kick drum.
That's the predecessor, sort of. That's the Unidyne 3. It's like the earlier version of the 57. It looks a little shorter than the.
Yeah, it's like black and like a brushed aluminum, I think. Or no, not aluminum, like a steel. It's like steel and black. And most of the ones I had as a kid had fixed cables. That's how cheap they were. They weren't to save money. Now, of course, I'm sure they made them, maybe for professional use, they made them with interchangeable. But yeah, that is a cheap microphone. And its snare top, snare bottom is 546s. Kicks is 546s. 3 414 EBUs, 1 mono, 2 stereo. Toms is underneath is 4, because he had a lot of toms. 4 57s. And on top is 4 21s. So he's using 4 21s on the top and 57s underneath. Wow. And then one room mic, which is a U87.
Yep. And
then, bass, for those that want to know, because there's been a little bit of discussion about the mic. RE20
and then direct.
And the direct would have been that Sunset Sound design box, which actually BAE are making. And the reason why I say that is because the Val Garay box is the Transformer DI. For those that want to know what that is, So basically what Val did is he used to record, for the people that know, he used to record at Sound Factory, which was up until very recently, only a few months ago, owned by Sunset Sound Factory. And their DIs are essentially a DI with a transformer in. So Val's design is very simple. The BAE are making with just a transformer in. So if you want that same DI sound, that's how you get it. So yeah, RE20 and a DI with the transformer in. Guitars, there you go, pair of SM57s. And when I asked them why a pair, apparently it's two 57s on two different speakers.
Right.
So it's the 412 and 157 on one speaker, 157 on the other. I don't know the blend that they used, but they mic'd it with two 57s on two speakers on Eddie's cab. And that was actually sitting in the, for those people that know Sunset Sound, that was sitting in the vocal booth to the right. And the reason why this is drawn like this is because this is the live room. So down here is the control room, and this is the corner of the live room. So the drums were put into the corner of the live room, and then the mic was out here, and then the bass cab was baffled at the back, and the sorry, not baffled at the back, in the back room, which is like where the piano is normally in Studio One. And then the offer here is the vocal booth, and that's where the guitar amp was. And I believe, when they were tracking, they were obviously all in the same room together. Pretty crazy. It's funny though, because I'd heard so many stories over the years from people who said they knew, and then you get the track sheets, and you talk to the people that were on the session, and it's very different.
Yeah.
It's and the hi-hat is oh, I love it. So it's got the hi-hat is the 451 at the top there, 451. Yep. It says with a 20 dB pad. I love it. It's Studer, 30 IPS, -3 on 456. Mm-hmm. And the 2-track, it was bounced. The mix was bounced to a Studer running at 15 IPS, the 2-track. -3 on 456. The delay was set to, said modulation, the delay was 15 IPS and 407. So they were running a tape delay, and of course they were using the plate that's Sunset, and they used the echo chamber. You can clearly hear the echo chamber and Eddie's guitar on you really got, because it goes da-na-na-na-na.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Anyway, so it's funny to have these kind of conversations and talk and see how these records that we grew up listening to. Okay, I don't know this, Mike. So the vocal was recorded using a. Do you know that?
What does it say?
SM60.
Well, SM sounds like a Shure dynamic. I don't know the SM60.
Nor do I. Anybody watching know what an SM60 is? That's a new one.
It's an omnidirectional dynamic.
Is that what it says?
I just found one on Reverb. It's a handheld omni dynamic.
Well, that's what the vocal was recorded with.
That's funny. Yeah.
Just destroying some illusions there and reinforcing some other ones. It's amazing how facts can reinforce some ideas and destroy some others.
That's right.
So I mean that really is all. It is about the performance. Definitely about the performance. I mean, I loved it. Take away the 87, you got less than like $4,000 worth of mics total, even at today's prices.
That's right.
I didn't see any 67s. There's no 47s. There's no 251s. There's no C12s.
It's all dynamics, right? Except for there was a pencil mic on the hi-hat.
451 on the hi-hat.
Oh, and the overheads, yeah, 414 EBs on the
414s, but yeah, EBs for those that are following our 414 discussion. The EBs. I mean, this on Van Halen 2. It's 1978. So
I had that on vinyl.
So did I.
It's a great record. I love that record.
Oh. Yeah, lots of people making SM60 was probably the scratch vocal. Yeah, that's interesting, Tony. They said they said that they did use scratch vocals in the final mix. So I suppose it would just come down to like how good the performances were.
Yeah.
You know, all the mics going through a UA610 pre's. No, it was in that room at that time. It was an API. They built the Craig told me that they had an API. They built those Demidio custom consoles in very early 80s, I think 79 or 80, 81, something like that. But it was an API before that. Yeah, Tony's saying, yeah, I mean, there are some scratch vocals on it. And I think there's not all the isolated vocals, but some isolated vocals are available. We'll see. What else? How can you honestly obsess over hardware so much for a bunch of plugins and go to bed? Good question, Paul. Matt knows the answer. What's the question, Paul? Apparently you know the answer, but we've got to find your question. Paul, what was your question? There's so many questions here and so much discussion. I can't see Paul's question. Can you re-ask Paul's question? There's someone's good question. Good question. Oh yeah, true condenser is electret condenser. That was just a question.
Oh yeah. So the way a true condenser capsule works, I'll try to keep this brief because I'm sure not everybody cares. But a condenser capsule is basically a capacitor. It's two metal plates with a gap in between. And when sound hits so one of those metal plates is flexible. And in the case of a condenser microphone capsule, it's usually a piece of really thin plastic, mylar, with a metallized coating. Could be gold, could be aluminum, could be a blend. And so sound hits the outside and that piece vibrates, which causes the spacing between the plates to change, which causes a capacitance change. So if you pump voltage into that system and then you get the voltage out of that system, the voltage is modulated. And if you turn that signal through a process of impedance changes and so on and so forth into audio, then you hear a really high fidelity recording of whatever it is that was vibrating the diaphragm in the first place. For that to work, you have to put voltage into it. Well, it used to be true that you had to put voltage into it. So a quote unquote true condenser capsule is that sort of design. I don't have any capsules with me, or I would show you one. So a true condenser capsule, you're pumping voltage into. I mentioned the old U87i that did not have a DC multiplier. The capsule was running at around 40 or 42 or 44 volts, somewhere in there. In the modern U87AI, it's running at 60. The higher the voltage you put into it, the higher the signal you get out, which is one of the reasons why the modern U87s have a lower noise floor, because they're outputting a capsule just appeared. So this is what a condenser capsule looks like. If I can get this out, these are a little bit of a pain in the butt to get out. So I'll have to just show you this way, which is fine actually. So this is a K47 style capsule.
Beautiful.
Oh, yeah. So gold covered mylar on top of a brass backplate. If you look at it edge on through the box there, you can see it's a single slab of brass. Anyway, the more voltage you put in, the more you get out. Now, what's the problem with that? What if you're out in the field and you don't have phantom power? You can lug batteries around, yeah. You can have microphones that have a 9-volt battery in them. Sometimes the C1000S, I think, didn't that used to have a 9-volt battery slot? Some of the old,
I remember it well, yeah.
Yeah, some of the old CAD mics had that as well, if I recall. In fact, the old U87i, I think, had a battery, or I don't know if it was interchangeable, but I think it had a battery in it too, didn't it?
I don't know, maybe.
In any case, someone came up with something called an electret design, which is pre-polarized. And the miracle of that is that you don't need to pump voltage into the capsule to get a usable signal level back out. Now, electrets in some circles have a bad name because the first generation product wasn't great. it was, miraculous that we could do it at all. But then 5 years later, people found that their prepolarized membranes were losing charge, which meant that your mic just didn't work anymore. Modern electrodes, and I guess Audio-Technica is probably the main innovator of this, and they continue to make some really phenomenal electret mics. In fact, the 5040, it's their new flagship cardioid-only vocal mic. And it has a rectangular diaphragm. It actually has 4 of them stacked up in a 2x2 array. That's an electret, or 4 of them. So modern electrets can be phenomenal, and there's no, people, I don't know if this was the sense of the question. You should not look down your nose at a mic because it's an electret. It can sound really good. And the nice thing about the electret style capsule design is that you can save money on the circuit. So my do-it-yourself parts business has a mic kit, a microphone kit that we sell for $199, and it's, why is it, it sounds amazing for the price, but why can we do it at that lower price? Where our true condenser kits cost $349 and up, the electret is $199, in part because we only have half the circuit inside. You don't need that DC circuit because we can just take, we don't need phantom voltage at all to run the capsule. We just need phantom voltage for the audio circuit, but it means the parts count is cut by half. And the circuit's simpler to build. It fits on one circuit board. It's easier to build, easier to make. We only make 1 circuit board, not 2. The directions booklet is half as long because you only have to solder half as many parts. So there's real economies to be realized by going with an electret design. And so long as it doesn't compromise your sound, it's a win. Now, the reality is there aren't that many large diaphragm electret designs. You mostly see the electret show up in the smaller capsules. The one in the mic parts product I mentioned is a smaller design. And then that shows up in like the CAD E100S. I believe that's the same capsule. The Shure KSM32, different capsule, but electret, that's also a smaller design. All those mics sound great. And if you can get some cost savings out of it, then it's a win.
That's amazing. You really do rock, and we've gone way past our hour that we had allowed. Firstly, I think thank everybody that's joined in here. We've had hundreds and hundreds of people viewing. This is pretty fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. That's really great.
Oh yeah, the discussion has been great, and I love that we're able to have a discussion here, and people are carrying on the discussion inside of this. But firstly, Matt, thank you ever so much for your generosity in doing this. Thank you for. I knew this would work so well because I knew that you had a love and respect of what you do, and I've really appreciated you talking very favorably about other manufacturers. You didn't trash talk anybody. I mean, the way you were talking about Bach and Brauner and like holding people in high regard, I think if anything is just going to make all of us love you more and appreciate what you do, because we understand that the way we started off this conversation, that guys like you and Larry Crane trying to help people. We're trying to go, because Larry's like, to me, Larry's like the ultimate success story for a home recordist. He started off like, he got a little jackpot studios, and then he's like doing demos for a little guy called Elliott Smith. Yeah. And then, and many other artists as well. And so I love that, because that is, I feel like, well, there's Larry and there's guys like you and me. I didn't go and do any assistant engineering in any studio or go to music school or whatever. I've got all this gear around here by doing demos with local bands in England and being in bands and developing stuff and making money and getting it signed and doing all the things that you have to do to hustle to create a career. And we're here, and you've got the spirit of what we're talking about here to help people. So makes me even more want to own your microphones, because I think, well, he's coming from the right place.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that, Warren. I appreciate being invited on, and I do love talking about mics. And as far as all the other companies that make mics, I avoided starting Roswell for a very long time because I didn't want to compete with all these people that I have such respect for. And a lot of the people who are making these amazing microphones, I've learned stuff from them, and I owe them a lot of thanks, and I have a ton of respect for them for what they do. And there's a lot of people out there, and I love that about this industry. There's a lot of people out there who are into it to make something that's as good as it can be.
Yep.
And they're not about the price and, you know, what can we do at this price point and that sort of thing. They're just like, no, screw that. I just want to make something that's great. And that's awesome. I mean, everyone who's watching this is the beneficiary of that attitude.
Yep,
the other great thing about it is, as you've seen, Warren, and as you've done this, produced like a pro and turned this into this giant machine that's just creating unbelievable content for everybody, is that most people in the industry are so generous with their knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And you found that with the producers and the engineers, and I found that with the guys who are making some of the gear, and it's just been, I've been blessed by all of this, and so I'm still having fun with it. It's just a gas every day. You know, I talk to these fantastic people about incredible gear, and it's fun. Everyone's having fun. I mean, how many desk jobs do you know that are like that? So
anyway, no, there's only a handful of really elitist people who don't want to share. It's a tiny little echelon of people. Everybody else in our industry is all the same. We're just fans of music. We all heard whatever band, whatever singer it was, whatever, when we were a kid, and we were just like, wow, what is this? I want to do this. It's just all I really want to get back to. I just want to feel like when guys like you and I are talking, we're just talking like a couple of kids, and that we can pick up a track sheet from a Van Halen record.
Totally amazing.
And freak out about microphones and the fact that they weren't using expensive microphones, and reinforcing the idea of it's all about the performance. And it's like, I love all of that, because there's more. It's like, especially in this crazy world that we're living in with all this crazy political unrest, let's always be looking for the similarities, not the differences.
Yeah, kudos. Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you ever so much for your time. Everybody's saying it was incredibly educational, and everybody wants us to do it again. So I'll see. Let me see how often I can get Matt for 2 hours of his life talking about microphones. He might not want to do this on a regular basis, but maybe I'll hit you up again in a couple of months, give you a couple of months rest.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'd love to come back. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. You rock. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to hit stop the broadcast.
All right.
Thanks very much. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing. Leave a bunch of comments and questions below.